Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Courtney Holden. The Holden family, a typical American household in Spokane. Judy and John Holden, who had two grown daughters living independently, also had an adopted son, Joshua, who still lived with them. Joshua, a quiet and introverted young man, had not yet started his own family and remained at home. The Holden's family approach to childcare was unconventional. The family saw fostering as a way to earn a steady income through government benefits. Judy's background and experience as a mother earned the authorities as trust. 4-year-old Courtney Holden, born on February 28, 1992, had been living in a shelter for 2 years when her life took a dramatic turn. In 1996, Courtney moved to Spokane to join the Holden family, comprised of Joshua and several other foster children. The little girl's heart was filled with hope for a loving and caring family. However, her dreams were short-lived. From a young age, Courtney was forced to bear the burden of excessive household chores. She was responsible for cleaning the entire house and washing dishes for every meal. If she made even the slightest mistake, she faced punishment. Life in the Holden home quickly became a nightmare, surpassing the hardships she experienced in the house. What was surprising was that the Holdens treated the other foster children with kindness, but they showed inexplicable hatred towards Courtney. Judy Holden was already an adult when Courtney joined the family, and Courtney was the last child they took from the orphanage. This might be the reason for their unusual behavior towards her. Courtney was subjected to strict rules, including being forbidden from going outside without permission. Visitors to the Holden home often witnessed Judy and Joshua mistreating Courtney, calling her Cinderella in a derogatory manner. Courtney found herself in a difficult situation, but she was a resilient girl who adapted to the harsh conditions over time. She learned to fear her foster mother and was terrified of her brother Joshua, who prohibited her from socializing with friends and peers. She was not allowed to have a mobile phone or other modern conveniences, and she only left the house when necessary and with permission. The only times she enjoyed some freedom were when the house was empty and she could step out into the backyard or chat with neighbors. As she grew into an adult, Courtney became accustomed to her life and learned to treat her foster parents with respect, despite their mistreatment. She did not become bitter, as she had no concept of a normal family life to compare hers to. Courtney's life improved significantly when her brother Joshua moved out of the house due to disagreements with their parents. This newfound freedom allowed her to come and go as she pleased, spend time with friends, and enjoy activities she had previously been restricted from. As a result, Courtney finally felt happy. As time passed, Courtney graduated from school and met a man named Michael, with whom she fell deeply in love. Michael treated her with kindness and care, a stark contrast to her previous experiences. Their relationship flourished, and they welcomed a son together in 2011. However, things took a surprising turn when Michael asked Courtney to move in with him and start a life together as a family. Despite his requests, Courtney chose to remain in her parents' house and ended her romantic relationship with Michael. By this time, the Holden house had become empty, as the foster children had grown up and moved out. Courtney's foster father, John Holden, had passed away, leaving her to live with her foster mother, Judy, and her child. Michael was allowed to visit his son, but only with Judy's permission. During Joshua's absence, Courtney's life with her son was relatively peaceful. However, after their father's death in 2014, Joshua returned and began to harass the family. He installed numerous surveillance cameras around the house, posting signs that read, "Smile, you're on camera." The cameras made Courtney anxious, as she knew that leaving the house would likely result in trouble from Joshua. Courtney's life took a turn for the worse around 2015. She confided in a neighbor that Joshua had taken away her freedom, forbidding her from having a phone, using social media, talking to outsiders, driving or leaving the house without his permission. He also forced her to cut ties with Michael after the child's birth. Despite this, Courtney remained silent and compliant. Neighbors noticed bruises on Courtney's face and arms and asked her about them. She openly admitted that Joshua was physically abusing her. The neighbors were concerned and tried to help her, even contacting the police. However, the Holdens were able to dismiss the cases because Courtney never publicly acknowledged the abuse. As time went on, Courtney was no longer allowed to talk to her neighbors, who only saw her outside in the evenings. She obeyed Joshua's rules without question. Those who knew Joshua described him as a large and intimidating man with a cruel and unpredictable nature. He was also known to be paranoid and prone to insults. Joshua had a history of violent behavior and had even boasted about being able to kill someone and dispose of their body with ease. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but the case was dropped due to lack of evidence and the victim's refusal to cooperate with the police. There were also suspicions that he had committed assault and misconduct against a woman in 2003, but he was never identified as the perpetrator. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and for burglary, leading to him leaving home for several years. The last message Courtney sent to a friend on Facebook, nearly 2 years ago, was a desperate cry for help. "I have to go. I must leave. Josh is coming." After that, her account went silent. Family acquaintances described the dynamics within the Holden household as strange and controlling. They were particularly puzzled by the fact that Courtney's child referred to Joshua's mother, Judy, as Mom and Joshua as Dad, while Courtney was referred to only by her first name. In August 2018, a heated argument escalated, prompting Courtney to try to leave, but Joshua, larger and stronger, physically restrained her and carried her back inside. It's the last time she was seen outside the household. It wasn't until nearly 2 years later, in October 2019, that concerns about Courtney's disappearance began to grow. Michael and his girlfriend, who had not seen Courtney in almost 2 years, started to worry about her whereabouts. He was eager to see his child, filed a missing person report with the police on October 24th, sparking an investigation into Courtney's disappearance. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her child and fled. However, they could not explain who was continuing to access her Social Security benefits and electronic food stamps. On the same day as the search, Joshua and Judy withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Center for Criminal Information, stating that she was safe and did not want to be searched for. However, the police discovered that she was actually one of Courtney's stepsisters. As the investigation continued, Joshua and Judy provided multiple conflicting accounts of Courtney's disappearance. They claimed that she had run away with a truck driver, and later, that she had left with a secret lover. The inconsistencies in their stories, combined with Courtney's unexplained absence, raised suspicions that the Holdens were hiding something. In October 2019, Joshua and Judy Holden suddenly left Spokane, further arousing the suspicions of detectives investigating the disappearance of Courtney. The Holdens' family flight from the area strengthened the detectives' conviction that they were involved in Courtney's disappearance. The investigation into Courtney's disappearance continued, and the Spokane Police Department attempted a welfare check in early October, which quickly escalated into a missing person case. The case was assigned to Major Crimes Detective Randy Lesser, who has spoken publicly about the investigation. The information gathered from police interviews and court records has shed light on the events surrounding Courtney's disappearance. When Lesser visited the house in early October, Judy told him that Courtney had been home just a few days prior. She claimed that Courtney had left on foot with her son. However, when Lesser asked for Judy's phone number, she became hostile and locked the door in his face. Later, Judy allowed police to enter the house to see Courtney's room, but she became very nervous. The house was extremely cluttered, with piles of items covering all available space on counters. Courtney's room was also cluttered, and the mattress was bare, giving the impression that no one had lived there recently. At one point, Judy panicked when she lost sight of one of the detectives behind a closed door and ordered the investigators to leave. When Lesser asked to search the rest of the house for Courtney's child, Judy refused. A neighbor reported seeing Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leaving in a van with a child. Detective Lesser found it suspicious that Courtney, who suffered from a chronic illness, had not seen a doctor since October 2017. Her last prescription was in July 2018, although she had been receiving medications monthly before disappearing. Surveillance footage showed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. Cameras also captured they withdrawing money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing. By October 24th, Joshua and Judy had left their home. When police arrived to execute a search warrant, they found that the DVR from the home surveillance system had been removed, and the family's 6 pets were gone. Joshua and Judy's mobile numbers were deactivated in mid-November, but 2 new numbers with Texas area codes were activated on the same day. A month after the Holdens left, a neighbor called the police to report activity at the house. It was one of Judy's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They claimed they hadn't seen Courtney in 2 years and that Judy had retired. In mid-December, Joshua and Judy traveled to Texas, where they were eventually found by the police at Judy's daughter's house. Courtney's son was also present at the scene. Joshua and Judy Holden were arrested and charged with identity theft, interfering with child custody, and using Courtney's bank accounts without her permission. Fortunately, the child was found safe and was reunited with his father. No other family members were charged with any crimes. The police searched Judy's home in Spokane with search dogs but did not find any signs of Courtney. They also searched a home in Texas and a vehicle in Oklahoma, but these searches did not yield any clues about Courtney's whereabouts. Joshua, 40, and Judy, 74, were held in a Texas jail, where they refused to speak with police and fought extradition to Spokane. The authorities awaited a governor's warrant to bring them back, but since there was insufficient evidence to link them to Courtney's disappearance, they were likely released. This case remains one of the most puzzling missing person cases, with little progress made during the month-long investigation. The police have extensive notes on the case, but Judy and Joshua maintain their innocence in Courtney's disappearance. The police, however, suspect that Courtney is likely deceased, but they lack concrete evidence to prove it. It's tragic that Courtney was drawn into the Holden family, who failed to provide her with the love and support she desperately sought. Despite their mistreatment, Courtney wanted to believe they were her family and struggled to defend herself against their cruelty. The cruel reality is that there are many ways to secretly dispose of a body using chemicals that can evade detection by experts and police dogs, leaving Courtney's fate a heartbreaking mystery. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Plass was born on December 11, 1990. She grew up in Chapee, Massachusetts, with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Amanda's mother, Michelle Mayes, described her daughter as a hippie and often joked that she was born in the wrong era. In 2011, Amanda worked as a waitress at a Friendly's in Chapee and was dating a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. On August 26, 2011, Seth called 911 to report that he had found Amanda unconscious in the kitchen of her third-floor apartment. During the call, Seth tearfully told the operator that when he arrived, Amanda was lying on the floor, unresponsive, with multiple stab wounds to her body. He did not know how to help and requested the police and an ambulance. When paramedics arrived, they confirmed that Amanda had died from multiple stab wounds, including to her chest, throat, and abdomen. Police cordoned off the home where the crime took place. When they arrived, They found Seth on the porch, crying and unable to calm down. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment. Whoever the perpetrator was, they had escaped but left behind some evidence. The first thing that caught the detectives' attention was the large amount of blood in the kitchen, indicating that the attack had been carried out with a knife. Police also found Nike shoe prints on the floor and handprints on the broken glass window. The motive for this brutal murder remains a mystery. Based on the condition and number of Amanda's injuries, detectives suspect that she may have known her attacker and that the motive was a personal vendetta. Therefore, the first suspect was Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green. Police took Seth Green in for questioning. It was no surprise that he was the first suspect, given his close relationship with the victim, his blood-stained clothing, and his role in calling 911. The fact that he and Amanda had been dating for less than 2 weeks before her death, and that her family barely knew him, raised suspicions. Seth was 7 years older than Amanda and likely had different views on some issues. But did that lead to an argument that resulted in the brutal crime? This led investigators to suspect that Seth could be the killer, even though he claimed Amanda was dead before he arrived at her apartment. They determined that about 2 hours had passed between Amanda's death and Seth calling 911. That was enough time to cover up evidence and remove the weapon. So the first question detectives had to answer was whether Seth Green had anything to do with Amanda's death. When Seth showed up at the police station, he looked like he had just been through something terrible. He was mourning the death of his girlfriend. Investigators wanted to know if his feelings were genuine or if he was just trying to deflect suspicion from himself. During questioning, Seth said he had been working all day. He had planned to take Amanda to the restaurant where she worked, but couldn't because of his busy schedule. Seth said he didn't know Amanda well because they weren't in a long-term relationship, but he loved her and had no reason to hurt her. Seth worked as a carpenter at a construction site. Investigators began asking him about his tools, implying that he may have used one of them to commit the crime. Seth often used a tool belt at work, which contained a variety of carpentry tools, including a knife. However, he claimed that he always put the tool belt back after work, and that day was no exception. Seth finished the job, changed his clothes and tools, and then went to see Amanda. He understood why he was the most suspected, but he still insisted that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend's death. The police eventually confirmed Seth's alibi. He even passed a lie detector test. When he arrived at the scene, he was wearing construction shoes, which clearly did not match the Nike shoe prints at the scene. In addition, his shoe size was much larger, and the fingerprints on the glasses did not belong to him. With these facts, the police eliminated him as a suspect. Because Amanda tried to resist, she inflicted injuries on the perpetrator. The perpetrator likely suffered scratches on his body in the first weeks after the crime, as a piece of skin belonging to the perpetrator was found under Amanda's fingernails, an important piece of evidence that the police had hoped for. However, when they tested the DNA sample, they found no match in the database. The motive for the crime remains unclear, as many of the items in Amanda's room were still intact. With no signs of forced entry, the police have two theories as to how the criminals entered the house. Amanda may have known them and let them in, or she may have forgotten to lock the door. Investigators interviewed Amanda's co-workers and friends and discovered that the case may have involved a love triangle. Before dating Seth, Amanda had been in a relationship with someone else, and the breakup was not smooth because Amanda initiated it. After a while, she started dating Seth, and Amanda's ex-boyfriend did not seem to be happy with this. Jealousy sometimes leads people to act rashly with serious consequences. Investigators checked the information but found this theory to be unlikely. Amanda's ex-boyfriend provided his DNA and fingerprints, neither of which matched the traces found on her body or at the scene. Furthermore, he had a convincing alibi. Police investigated other leads but failed to find a solution to Amanda's death, leaving the investigation at a standstill. Amanda's family was determined to find justice, so they distributed flyers and held community events in the hope that someone would come forward with vital information. Amanda's mother, Michelle, said her daughter was not perfect, but she did not understand why Amanda died and why no one had reported any useful information to the police. Amanda's family faced another emotional challenge. They discovered that several police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body on their phones and shared them with others, including civilians. According to an internal report, Sergeant Keith Lame, a senior officer who was in charge of monitoring the scene at 73 School Street, where Amanda was stabbed to death on August 26, 2011, was one of the photographers. He sent the photos from his cell phone to another sergeant, who then forwarded them to a patrol officer. One officer shared the photo with civilians, including a coach at a youth soccer game. Records show that Keith used his cell phone to take the photo. Keith then forwarded the photo to Sergeant Jeffrey Godair. Sergeant Jeffrey emailed the photo to Patrolman Chad Levesque. Patrolman Chad shared the photo of Amanda, lying on the kitchen floor, with other soccer coaches. As he did so, Chad said, "This is something I have to deal with at work." The photo was shown to at least 3 coaches at a youth soccer game in Agawam the day after the murder, according to Captain William Jebb, the internal affairs officer who wrote the report. At that time, Patrolman Terry Deck, who was assigned to record all traffic in the apartment for state police, took a photo of Amanda's body and emailed it separately to 6 Chicopee police officers. The investigation found that all 6 officers deleted the emails. None of them were punished for wrongdoing, and their names were not listed on criminal records. The others were punished for incompetence and failure to meet work standards. Terry and Keith, who took the photos, received letters of reprimand. Jeffrey and Chad were docked wages. Nearly 2 years after the murder, there was no sign that the investigation was any closer to finding the culprit. So investigators decided to review all the relevant evidence, hoping to find some missing information. After reviewing the evidence and items in Amanda's bedroom, they discovered a dry erase board with a suspicious message. The message read, "Dennis was here on November 8th. Interestingly, November 8th was only about 2 weeks before Amanda's body was discovered. Investigators began to wonder about the man named Dennis and his role in the case. They began to investigate the relationship between Dennis and Amanda by examining phone records and social media posts. While investigating Amanda's apartment, police discovered that her ex-boyfriend had given them a crucial clue. He said that Amanda's apartment had been broken into several times during her absence. In particular, Amanda told him that she suspected a young Puerto Rican man whose name began with the letter D. However, she did not want to report the incident to the police and wanted to resolve the situation herself by talking to the man. Amanda tried to talk to the man about the break-in, but he would not listen. Amanda then informed him that a neighbor had witnessed him at her apartment. She also begged him to return items that were missing from her home. However, the man became angry and left. The main goal of the investigators was to identify Dennis and determine whether he was involved in Amanda's death. They discovered that a man named Dennis Rosa Roman lived near where Amanda died. A search of Dennis's records revealed that he had been convicted of burglary and breaking and entering. However, no fingerprints were found that matched the ones found at Amanda's home. Police tracked Dennis to Westfield, Massachusetts, and asked him to come to the police station to talk, but he refused. During the brief encounter, Dennis appeared very nervous. Surprisingly, Dennis turned himself into the police station in November 2013 at the age of 22. Police questioned Dennis about his connection to Amanda. Although Dennis admitted to knowing Amanda from Choppy, he said he had not seen her in several years. This made sense since Amanda had been dead for some time. Investigators then asked him if he had ever been to Amanda's apartment. He replied that he had never been there and did not really know her well. He only admitted that he sometimes sold Amanda marijuana and had had a few brief interactions with her. During questioning, Dennis agreed to provide an oral DNA sample and provided his shoe size. The results showed that his shoe size matched the shoes found at the crime scene. Officers also noted that Dennis was wearing a pair of Nike Air Max shoes, the same type as the shoes found at the scene but with a different sole pattern. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions and promised to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Because there was insufficient evidence to arrest him, officers were forced to release him. This raised concerns that he might be attempting to flee, causing the investigation to stall. Further investigation revealed that Amanda had been in telephone contact with Dennis on July 28, 2011. She made 4 calls and received 5 calls from him. At the same time, Dennis changed his initial statement to police, admitting that he had spoken to Amanda at times. According to Dennis, Amanda told him that people frequently broke into her apartment when she was away, but she did not report it to the police because nothing of value was missing. However, investigators had heard this story many times before and now suspected Dennis was behind the break-ins. They believed he was hiding something, as his statement changed and lacked a clear explanation. When shown a photo of the dry erase board that read, "Dennis was here on November 8, 11, Dennis suddenly remembered writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never been in Amanda's apartment. Additionally, DNA testing revealed that his DNA matched DNA found under Amanda's fingernails and that his fingerprints were on a glass pane at the crime scene. This evidence confirmed Dennis's connection to the crime. After realizing that too much evidence was directly against him, Dennis changed his story again. He now claimed to have been present at the crime scene and tried to save Amanda from the attacker, implying that someone else was involved. When asked about the man's identity, Dennis refused, citing fear for his safety and that of his family. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the alleged perpetrator, a tall, 170 to 200-pound white male with light skin, blue eyes, wearing old pants and dirty boots, along with a t-shirt that read, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?" Detectives did not believe Dennis's testimony, as all the evidence pointed to only one person being present at the crime scene when Amanda was stabbed. They arrested Dennis and charged him with the murder of Amanda Plass. The trial began in 2016, nearly 3 years later. Dennis's lawyers defended their client, arguing that although he was present at the crime scene, he was not responsible for Amanda's death. They accused the police of mishandling the investigation and framing Dennis after they failed to investigate thoroughly. Dennis claimed that on the day of Amanda's death, the drug dealer forced him to come to her apartment because Amanda owed the dealer $500 or $600. He claimed that the dealer started stabbing Amanda with a knife when things got bad. Dennis claimed that he wanted to intervene but was unable to stop the dealer. Dennis also claimed that Amanda had grabbed his hand, which is why his DNA was found under her fingernails. Prosecutors presented a different version of events. According to them, Dennis broke into Amanda's apartment while she was away and left a note with his name on her whiteboard. Amanda discovered this, suspected Dennis was the culprit, and called him to ask him to return her stolen belongings, which led to 9 phone calls between Amanda and Dennis. Prosecutors claimed that on the day of the murder, Dennis returned to Amanda's apartment thinking she was at work. However, Amanda had come home and a fight broke out, leading to Dennis killing her. A 12-person jury found Dennis guilty of causing the death of Amanda Plass in July 2016, after hearing 8 days of testimony and deliberating for 5 hours. The court sentenced Dennis to life in prison without parole. The police department's internal investigation into the scandal surrounding the release of Amanda's photo was delayed for years. However, in 2018, Officer Jeffrey Gaudier was finally fired in connection with the case. Although he appealed the decision, he returned to work in 2020. Due to his misconduct and previous disciplinary actions, a commission demoted him to patrol officer. Amanda's law went into effect in Massachusetts on August 4, 2022. The law makes it a misdemeanor for first responders to illegally take photos of a crime scene, punishable by up to a year in jail or a $2,000 fine. Amanda's family also filed a lawsuit against the city of Choppy, which was eventually settled out of court for $100,000. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Joshin Ashbrook. The story we are about to explore takes place in Newport Richey, Florida, a typical American suburb with a population of around 15,000. Located near Tampa, this area is known for its beautiful beaches and is generally a peaceful place with a low crime rate. Residents typically feel safe, and when crimes do occur, they are usually minor and not violent. However, the events of 2002 shocked the entire community. In the 20 Ruse, the Ashbrook family lived in Newport Richey. The family included Tara, Robert, and their 2 daughters. The eldest daughter, Joshin, was born on February 21, 1986, in Kokomo, Indiana, where her parents were living at the time. Due to job challenges, the family decided to move to Newport Richey to improve their financial situation. At that time, Joshin had just started walking, and her younger sister had just been born. Tara and Robert found jobs and their relationship was strong. They wanted to provide everything their daughters needed and help them discover their talents. They noticed Joshin had a passion for music and dance, so Robert encouraged her to pursue these interests. As a result, Joshin began taking music classes and taking voice lessons. Joshin shared this passion with her younger sister, who happily followed her lead. What started as a simple hobby soon became a focused pursuit, and Joshin became increasingly dedicated to honing her talent. Her parents recognized her enthusiasm and began taking her to events and competitions to help her mature. Joshin believed that becoming a singer would not only bring her joy, but also provide a good income in the future. Joshin became deeply engaged in her music, leading people to think she was genuinely preparing for a professional career. Her talent made her well known in her town, further boosting her reputation. She began to regularly perform at various events, which became her signature. Even in elementary school, she started writing poetry and song lyrics, making friends with others who shared her passion for music. During her school years, she recorded several demo songs of her own creation by visiting a music studio on her own, using her savings instead of asking her parents for financial support. She started reaching out to various music and radio organizations to promote her compositions, hoping to attract the attention of a producer. It was challenging to succeed in this field, but she was determined to pursue her dream of a music career. However, if that didn't work out, she had no intention of giving up. She is also interested in law and plans to attend university alongside her musical ambitions. By 2002, when Joshin turned 16, she entered a rebellious phase typical of many teenagers. She spent increasing amounts of time focused on her vocal training, writing songs, visiting recording studios, and hanging out with friends. This shift in priorities began to negatively impact her academic performance, causing her grades to slip. Additionally, she started attending parties with older peers, and her new friends were not the kind her parents approved of. During this time, she also began to experiment with alcohol. Meanwhile, her relatives noticed that she wasn't achieving significant success in music, leading them to urge her to consider a backup plan and focus on her education instead. Tara and Robert were concerned about their daughter's behavior. They often pressured Joshin to succeed in school, continue her education, and pursue music as a hobby. Her parents worried that if she didn't graduate, she wouldn't be able to get into college, which they believed would hinder her chances of achieving musical success. Their efforts to help Joshin deal with her teenage challenges often resulted in arguments and misunderstandings. After one such incident, Joshin ran away from home, and this soon became a regular occurrence. Her parents tried to control their teenage daughter by keeping her at home, but their efforts failed. Joshin often ran away at night, only to return in the morning. Initially, this behavior upset her parents even more, but over time, Tara and Robert realized that pressuring her wasn't working. They decided to ease their control temporarily, so their daughter could settle down. Although she still ran away frequently, her parents became less anxious. On July 30, 2002, Joshin went for a walk with friends, leaving home late in the evening. She returned around 2:00 a.m. after attending a party. When she returned home, her parents woke up and immediately noticed the smell of alcohol and marijuana on her. This angered her mother, Tara, who lost her temper and accused her daughter of being disobedient and behaving inappropriately. Tara insisted that her daughter cut off her friends, whom she considered a bad influence. Meanwhile, her father, Robert, chose to stay out of the argument. He had witnessed similar confrontations many times before. He did not want to resort to violence and damage his relationship with Joshin. So Robert let his wife resolve the conflict herself. However, they could not control Joshin's behavior. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. After calming down, Tara went to bed, hoping that they would resolve their differences by the next morning. When Tara and Robert woke up in the morning, they noticed that Joshin had not returned. They began to worry. Tara remembered the phone numbers of all the friends Joshin might have slept with, but when they called, there was no sign of her at any of them. Her parents then decided to check other places Joshin might have been. Unfortunately, they could not find her or any clues as to where she might be. As night fell, the Tara became increasingly panicked, and the Robert made the decision to report her missing at the nearest sheriff's office. However, Joshin was well known to the local police due to previous incidents of running away, so her parents' report didn't receive much attention at first. The police tried to reassure them and suggested they go home to wait for their daughter to come back. The parents reported a recent argument to the police, saying that their daughter had not returned home that morning, which was unusual for her. None of her friends knew of her whereabouts. This situation seemed different from Joshin's previous elopements, but the police remained skeptical. They assumed that teenage girls often needed time to calm down after an argument and believed that she would return soon. However, her parents also realized that they would have to wait at least a day after Joshin went missing before filing a report. So Tara and Robert returned home, hoping that they would find Joshin there. Unfortunately, she had not returned. Her parents couldn't wait any longer. They didn't waste any time. Her family searched for Joshin all over the city, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The next morning, when the electrician was on his way to work, he passed by a familiar stretch of road. Then he saw something suspicious on the side of the road. When he got closer, he realized it was a body. This scared him, and he quickly called the police. When the police arrived, they confirmed that the body belonged to a girl between the ages of 16 and 18. They quickly decided to investigate recent missing persons reports, which led them to believe that the victim was Joshin. Unfortunately, the photo provided by her parents was not very helpful, as her face was disfigured. The police chose not to rush to call in relatives to identify the body, wanting to avoid causing them distress. The body had many injuries and a deep cut on the neck. The body was sent to a forensic expert for an autopsy. Police initially believed the attack was abuse because her clothes were torn. However, the medical examiner found no signs of abuse. Surprisingly, the cause of death was a shallow cut to the neck, but the cut was made after her death. She had a broken collarbone and extensive bruising to her upper chest. The injuries to her arms and torso suggested that she had been able to fight off her attacker for a long time before she was killed. Forensic experts discovered valuables, skin cells, and some hair under her fingernails, all of which belonged to the suspect. A thorough analysis of the evidence collected from the body suggested that the girl had not been murdered in the alley. She may have been moved there and dumped to throw the investigation off track. Tire tracks were found in the nearby wooded area, likely dating from around the time the body was moved. After experts confirmed that the body was Joshin's, her family was informed of the tragic news. They came to identify the body, which was a heartbreaking moment for them. During her initial conversation with the police, Tara suggested checking on their neighbor, John Hansen. She recalled that he had been accused of molesting schoolgirls, but Tara was unable to provide any specific details. When police arrived at the address, they found only John's wife. She told police that he had moved away a few months before the incident. He lived out of town and the couple was planning to divorce. According to her, he was out of town at the time of the attack, so he could not have been involved. Police also investigated John and found no history of violence or any criminal record, contrary to what Tara had said. He was ruled out as a suspect, and police turned their attention to analyzing the evidence they had collected. The tire tread patterns were particularly noteworthy, along with skin particles and hair believed to belong to the potential perpetrator. A thorough analysis of the tire prints revealed that a similar pattern matched 7 different tire brands. This information helped police significantly narrow down their search area. They also determined, based on the depth of the tire tracks, that the vehicle was not a passenger car or a truck, but possibly a pickup truck. On July 31, police received a call from a woman reporting that she had seen Joshin that morning. This information helped establish a timeline. The witness mentioned that a girl who introduced herself as Joshan had called early in the morning and wanted to speak to her son, but the young man was out of town at the time. Joshan asked if she could leave him a letter. The mother agreed to deliver the letter. Joshin did indeed come to her home around 9 a.m. and gave her son an envelope. According to the witness, when Joshin arrived, she got out of a red pickup truck. The driver was a man in his 40s with short hair. During the exchange of envelopes, the witness did not notice anything suspicious, except that Joshin seemed to be in a hurry. She could not see the driver's face clearly and could only provide a rough description. The witness remembered not only the letter, but also the phone number Joshin called. There was no evidence or anything unusual in the letter. It simply stated that Joshin wanted to break up with the guy. When police called the number provided by the witness, a man named Philip Thompson answered. He explained that on July 31, he was driving home early in the morning with his daughter when he encountered a hitchhiker on the road. He decided to give her a ride. The hitchhiker was Joshin, who had asked to use his cell phone to call an unknown woman. She then asked for a ride home to deliver an envelope to a friend, and Philip agreed to help her. They stopped at a supermarket, but after Joshin got out and walked in an unknown direction, police asked Philip to come to the station to give a formal statement. He agreed but never showed up, either that evening or the next day. The police viewed this situation as alarming. They attempted to call Philip again, but could not reach him. This raised further suspicion about him. The police officers then investigated his officially registered phone number. They discovered that Philip was a criminal with a record of several misdemeanors and a murder conviction. He had previously been charged with the murder of math teacher Gary Thorne, who was found dead in his home. During a search of his home, police found items stolen from Gary's home, linking him to the brutal murder. Although Philip never confessed, he was sentenced to many years in prison. His lawyers continued to work to get him released, and due to several errors by the judge, they were able to have the case reviewed. After a retrial, his sentence was reduced to 6 years and he was released early. After being released, Philip found work as a laborer on a construction site, where he met a woman named Marta. who was a foreman. Marta was a single mother raising a daughter, and together they later had a daughter named Patricia. Over time, their relationship deteriorated for unspecified reasons, leading to a divorce and a custody battle over Patricia. In 2002, Philip unexpectedly gained custody of his daughter, despite his troubled criminal record. He continued to live with her, but he was implicated in a murder case when Joshan was found dead, and he was reportedly the last person to see her alive. Police tried to contact Philip, but he never picked up his phone. They then decided to investigate the supermarket that Philip claimed he visited with Joshan. Police obtained the store's surveillance camera footage and analyzed it. They discovered that Philip and Joshan had indeed been to the supermarket on July 31, the day of the disappearance. Philip was seen parking at the mall with Joshan and his daughter Patricia. After shopping, they left and Joshan gave a letter to her boyfriend's mother. Unfortunately, at the time, there were few surveillance cameras on the streets, making it difficult to track Philip's movements. Philip was wanted, and his case attracted considerable media attention across the United States. There were many clues from witnesses. Among them, some useful information emerged that helped locate Philip. When his friend contacted the police, he had been living with Philip and his daughter for several months. He gave Philip's address, which led the police to his last known address, where they found crucial evidence. During a search of the apartment, they discovered a small nightstand with bleach stains and small blood stains that were later confirmed to be those of the murdered Joshan. Additionally, a red pickup truck was registered to Philip. From that point on, the police began treating him as a fugitive killer. Police spoke with Philip's daughter Patricia, who recalled a recent trip with her father. During the nighttime ride home, she fell asleep in the car. She woke up to find her father stopping the car and letting a strange girl in, who introduced herself as Joshan. Joshan shared that she ran away from home and asked for a ride. She was looking forward to going to Los Angeles to showcase her songs and become a famous singer. After a while, Joshan asked to use the phone, and they stopped several times at a store and a house. They eventually came to a river, where they swam and fished. Then Patricia fell asleep. When Patricia woke up, she found Joshan was no longer in the car. When she asked her father where the strange girl had gone, he did not answer. For months, police had no idea where Philip was. He seemed to have disappeared completely. He didn't make any phone calls or pay any bills. He kept himself so well hidden that police began to wonder if he was still in the country. Then, almost a year later, during a check on a suspicious car, a patrol officer discovered a clue about Philip. It turned out that the person in the car was a friend of Philip's. He said that during this time, Philip had been living with a friend and was not officially registered, which helped him evade detection. Philip was eventually found and arrested on October 28, 2013, with police collecting a hair sample from him and comparing it to samples found under Joshan's fingernails, which showed a match. Philip's pickup truck tires also matched the prints found at the crime scene. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Philip, he refused to talk to police and would not confess to his guilt. During the trial, the prosecutor's office presented a timeline of events to the jury. After leaving home, Joshan got into a car driven by Philip, who was accompanied by a young woman named Patricia, who made Joshan feel safe. He drove Joshan to a store and helped deliver mail, acting in a way that made her trust him. However, when his daughter Patricia fell asleep, Philip took the opportunity to attack her, possibly with the intent to rape her. Joshan fought back, stopping the attack, which enraged Philip. In his rage, he killed her and then returned to his apartment. After Patricia woke up, Philip took her to her mother and then returned to dispose of the body and clean up the scene. During the trial, many were shocked by Philip's behavior. Joshan's mother, Tara, accidentally glanced at Philip, who immediately responded with a wink and a smile, showing no remorse for his actions. Although he pleaded not guilty, the evidence against him was strong enough for a jury to find Philip Thompson guilty of first-degree murder. On December 2008, he was sentenced to death, as the death penalty is practiced in Florida. His verdict was later challenged with the support of his attorney. In 2024, Philip's death sentence was commuted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Hannah Graham. Hannah Graham grew up in a loving family that appreciated the little joys of life. Hannah was smart, healthy, and musically gifted. She was a vibrant young woman until she met Jesse Matthew, and her vibrant life took a dark turn. In every photo, from childhood to adolescence, Hannah is smiling. Those who knew her knew of Hannah's great ambition and ambition. Tragically, it seems her bright future was cut short by an unexpected evil that could devastate a life in an instant. On September 12, 2014, at approximately 9:30 p.m., Hannah left her home in Grand Margate to meet friends. By 10 p.m., they went to FIC restaurant in Charlotte Sweeney. After spending some time together, Hannah later went to a party at the Caden Plaza Apartments on Tina Street. During the party, she told her friends that she was feeling unwell and wanted to leave. One friend offered to walk her home, but Hannah declined, as she lived only a few minutes away from Caden Plaza. Around midnight, Hannah said goodbye to her friends, but instead of going home, she walked in the opposite direction toward the Tempo restaurant. Security cameras on the buildings along her route captured footage of her as she headed to the shopping center on Charlotte Street, where Tempo was located. It was already September 13th, and at 12:56 a.m., the Hannah sent a message to a friend saying she was lost and not feeling well. At that time, Hannah was believed to be very drunk. It was unclear whether she had wandered into a different part of town by accident or due to her intoxication. Meanwhile, 32-year-old Jesse Matthew, a taxi driver, stopped at the Lazy Parrot for a drink. Afterward, he visited several other bars in the city center, where he harassed women. The women later reported that Jesse's behavior was inappropriate and crossed boundaries. Jesse eventually spotted Hannah. He initially walked past her, but then realized this was a great opportunity and decided to turn around and follow her. Surveillance footage captured Hannah wandering the streets, seemingly confused about her surroundings and the time. Jesse approached her, hugged her, and they headed to the Tempo restaurant. Inside, he bought 2 drinks. Witnesses later gave conflicting accounts. Some claimed Hannah was inside the bar area, while others claimed she was outside at a table. There was also no clear evidence that she was served a drink. Hannah's final text message to her friend, saying she was stuck, was sent in the middle of the night, but the meaning behind her words remains unclear. On September 14th, when Hannah's family could not reach her, they became alarmed and reported her missing to the police. Hannah was a person who always notified her family before going out. She was never away for long and always answered the phone. As time went on, her family's worries grew. Meanwhile, the police began searching for Hannah, with state and federal police joining the effort. Hannah's disappearance caused considerable concern in Charlotte Sweeney and the Albert Mall area, especially since there had been previous cases of missing women. Hannah's case quickly attracted public attention and the search for her intensified. Through a detailed investigation and the collection of video footage from numerous city cameras, police were able to piece together a timeline of the events of that tragic night. Hundreds of people gathered at the University of Virginia to support Hannah's family. Many volunteers joined the search, doing everything they could to help Hannah return safely. Hannah had helped others in need, and now it was their turn to help her. Jesse Matthew grew up in a low-income family. He faced constant bullying and humiliation at school, which led to a stutter and difficulties in his studies. Despite these challenges, he persevered and continued his education, eventually earning a full football scholarship to Liberty University in 2002. However, he was soon accused of violence against another student, prompting him to transfer to a different school. Upon entering Christopher Newport University, Jesse could no longer contain his desire, and soon rumors began to spread of a new sexual assault committed by Jesse. The victims remained unknown, having dropped out of school. Jesse made a living by working odd jobs for a while, switching jobs from time to time. In 2005, a young woman was attacked and raped in the Fairfax district while walking home from the store. The attacker threatened to kill her if she resisted. Although she survived the ordeal, she was hospitalized and treated, which included procedures to collect DNA samples. Police gathered evidence from the crime scene to create a DNA profile, but it did not match any suspects in police databases. Due to her fear for her safety, the woman ultimately chose to return to her home country of India. Surprisingly, family and friends described Jesse as a kind and helpful person. Even his ex-girlfriends found him charming and gentle. In fact, Jesse faced multiple sexual assault charges. One of the police officers who was friends with Jesse said that he had a very difficult childhood and was abused during his school years. Jesse was bullied a lot and forced to keep things a secret. Although this was never fully confirmed by his family or friends, Jesse himself stated that he was abused in his early years. This may explain how he went from being a good person to someone with malicious intent. Jesse's father struggled with alcoholism and was often absent from home for long periods of time. In 2006, his father was arrested for breaking the law. Did these experiences shape Jesse's personality and lead him to become a serial killer? On September 19th, police obtained a search warrant for the Jesse's apartment. They seized a mobile phone without a SIM card and a pair of men's shorts. DNA tests revealed both Jesse's and Hannah's biological material on these items. A second search warrant was executed for his apartment. And the next day, police announced that while he had not yet been formally charged with Hannah's kidnapping, he was the last person seen with her on the night she disappeared. During this second search, several bags of evidence were collected, including a phone, laundry, bedding, a pillow, clothing, a toothbrush, test tubes of hair, a wallet, and a cigar butt. Police obtained a third search warrant, allowing them to collect a pair of white shorts, a maroon shirt, and a towel with a reddish-brown stain. They also seized an orange Chevrolet Suburban belonging to Jesse. On September 20th, Jesse arrived at the Charlotte police station with Will, requesting an attorney and refusing to answer any questions about Hannah. Afterward, he left the station, got into his car, and sped away. Police pursued him, but he managed to evade capture. A nationwide search for him was initiated. It was later revealed that Jesse had obtained a new driver's license and withdrawn most of his bank funds. Jesse's family has urged him to share any information he has about Hannah with the police. His aunt, Alice Fletcher, has pledged to support Hannah's parents. Many people in Charlotte have joined the search efforts. Additionally, Hannah's college friends have provided significant support to the family. On September 24th, Jesse was seen on a beach in Texas. Since his car had been confiscated, he was living in a tent there. A bystander recognized him from a news report and called 911. Jesse was arrested and identified as a suspect in the kidnapping of Hannah. A $100,000 reward was offered for information about Hannah's location. He was taken to the Charlotte Regional Jail and held without bail while the search for Hannah continued. On October 18th, a body was discovered on a plot of land on Old Lynch Road in Albemarle County. The site was located behind an abandoned house and surrounded by brush. Police cordoned off the crime scene after the discovery of the body. The sheriff noted that further testing was needed to confirm the identity and expressed gratitude to those searching. A crop top and jeans matching those worn by Hannah were found nearby. A wristwatch was also found, but no underwear, shoes, or cell phone were found. A local resident informed police that on the morning of September 13th, he noticed Jesse's car parked on the road behind the house. The car doors were closed, and there was no one inside. It was determined that the Jesse was familiar with the area, having worked as a taxi driver nearby for several years. The body was sent to Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Kevin Y. for examination. He conducted an autopsy and concluded that the death resulted from intentional violence, with strangulation being the likely cause. Further tests showed broken noses, and the examiner confirmed that the victim was Hannah Graham. DNA evidence was collected, allowing police to link Jesse to Hannah's murder. Police then also connected him to another crime. This was the January 2010 kidnapping of Morgan Harrington. Her body was discovered on a farm in Albemarle County by the farm owner, who initially mistook them for animal bones. When he realized they were human bones, he quickly contacted the police. Morgan's body and Hannah's body were found just 6 miles apart. The DNA from Morgan's shirt matched that of Jesse Matthew, and surprisingly, it also matched evidence collected in 2005 in Fairfax. On February 10, 2015, Jesse Matthew was formally charged with the murder of Hannah Graham. He faced charges of first-degree murder and kidnapping. Prosecutors sought the death penalty. Attorneys proposed a plea deal that would have reduced his sentence if he confessed to the murders of Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington. The victims' families met to discuss the deal, but when they learned that it only carried a 25-year sentence for murder, they rejected it. On March 2, 2016, Jesse Matthew accepted a plea deal in which he confessed to the murders of Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham. In exchange, the death penalty was removed. Jesse's family had hoped Judge Chad would take into account his troubled upbringing and the sexual abuse he had endured. Despite this, the judge found Jesse Matthew guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping of Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Jesse's trial lasted less than 3 days. Along with the charges previously mentioned, he was charged with assaulting and raping a girl in Fairfax County in 2005. Jesse Matthew was sentenced to 3 life terms in the Fairfax girl case. As the judge read out his sentence, he emphasized the violent nature of Jesse's attacks. After the verdict, Jesse's mother screamed and had to leave the courtroom. Throughout the trial and sentencing, Jesse remained silent. In December 2020, Jesse was taken from Sac State Prison to Richmond Hospital under police escort, where he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. The terrible crimes he committed had already been resolved, and by December 2022, Jesse Matthew was still alive, with no additional updates on his health at that time. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will delve into a new case. The case of Bridget Frisbee. Bridget Frisbee was born in December 1993 in Katy, Texas, USA. Shortly after her birth, her parents abandoned her, and she was placed in an orphanage. When Bridget was 18 months old, Robert Frisbee and Catherine visited the orphanage. After years of trying without being able to have children, they decided to make happy the baby abandoned by her parents. Catherine had always longed for a daughter, and from the moment she first met Bridget, she felt a deep connection. Without hesitation, Robert and Catherine decided to adopt Bridget. From then on, they providing Bridget with a family full of love and protection. Bridget was an active and kind-hearted child. From a young age, she developed a passion for horseback riding, poetry, and painting. Her positive and friendly nature helped her make many friends. Her adoptive parents often wondered how her biological parents could have abandoned such a wonderful child. However, despite her cheerful demeanor, Bridget faced significant challenges throughout her life. When Bridget was 10 years old, her adoptive mother passed away after battling a long-term illness for several years, despite always being cared for and encouraged by family. Catherine's death was a devastating loss for Bridget, who had seen Catherine as her real mother. During this difficult period, father and daughter grew closer, supporting each other as they navigated their grief. Robert deeply loved his daughter, and over the years, they built a warm and trusting relationship. As Bridget grew older, her rebellious nature became more and more evident. Robert struggled to keep up with her boundless energy, but she continued to embrace life with enthusiasm. Despite their differences, they maintained a close and loving relationship. Bridget was an active and lively student. She excelled academically and had ambitious dreams for the future, much to her father's delight. She aspired to attend college and build an independent life. On April 3, 2011, a group of teenagers were riding motorcycles along the edge of a Texas forest. This was a strip of land planted near the family's home. The area was usually used for riding dirt bikes and ATVs. Towards the end of the trip, the young athletes saw something suspicious off to the side of the trail. Venturing slightly into the woods, they made a horrifying discovery: a human body. Realizing the importance of preserving evidence, the group refrained from disturbing the scene. They observed blood on the girl's clothes and head, and it appeared that someone had attempted to hide the body by covering it with branches and leaves. However, the concealment was so poorly done that the body was visible even from a considerable distance. The police were immediately called to the scene, where the high school students waited for their arrival. None of the teens recognized the girl. The officers discovered that the victim had no identification, making it impossible to determine her identity at the time. During a cursory inspection of the area, the detectives assumed that the massacre had been carried out right there. The victim had been attacked and left in the forest. A forensic examination later confirmed that there were no signs of abuse violence, and all of her belongings, including valuables, were still with her. This ruled out robbery and abuse assault as motives, so they suspect that the attack was related to personal hostility or jealousy. The police immediately investigated the victim's identity. They noticed the victim appeared to be just under 20 years old. She was found lying on the ground, partially covered with branches and dirt. A large wound to the head was the only visible injury, indicating a fatal blow that killed the young schoolgirl on the spot. The wound was caused by a 9mm bullet at close range, which passed through her head. Near the body, investigators discovered an empty 9mm ammunition box. This was the only clue with which the detectives had to start searching for the culprit of the tragedy. While examining the crime scene, investigators noticed another peculiar detail. A few meters from the body, a small patch of the forest floor had its top layer of soil removed, leaving a bare spot. It appeared as though someone had started digging, but stopped abruptly. The reason for this was unclear. It was possible the killer had intended to bury the body but was interrupted or frightened away. However, the police acknowledged that this detail might have been unrelated to the girl's murder. To identify the deceased, investigators began reaching out to local residents. They went door to door, speaking with people who lived near the forest. News of the brutal murder quickly spread through the community, causing widespread concern. The police used the media to inform the public about the incident, which had occurred just a few hundred meters from some homes, leaving families horrified. Such a crime was unprecedented in their peaceful area. Residents were asked if they had noticed any suspicious vehicles or unfamiliar individuals heading toward the forest or behaving strangely. Meanwhile, deputies from the sheriff's department visited dozens of homes and interviewed numerous witnesses. However, no valuable information emerged on the first day of the investigation. Just as the officers were beginning to lose hope of finding a helpful lead, a woman from a nearby settlement provided a significant clue. She explained that the night before the body was found, she had been relaxing with friends in her backyard. Between 2 and 3 a.m., she heard a loud noise resembling an explosion. Her friends also confirmed hearing the same sound. According to the witnesses' recollections that night, no one attached much importance to this extraneous noise since she lived next to a forest area and knew that it could have been hunters. Moreover, the noise seemed distant, and she wasn't even sure if it was a bullet sound. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, no additional information surfaced. The police returned to the station and began searching their database to determine if the murdered woman was listed as missing. Given the circumstances, it was likely her details had been added only a few days earlier. Unfortunately, during these checks, officers were unable to identify the victim found in the forest. The case took a turn the next day. On the morning of April 4, 2011, Robert Frisbee went to the sheriff's department to report that he hadn't been able to contact his 17-year-old daughter, Bridget, for over a day. He was deeply concerned, especially after hearing about a body discovered in the nearby forest, not far from their home. At this time, the identity of the body remained unknown, so detectives immediately communicated with Robert. He revealed that he had been unable to reach his adopted daughter, Bridget, through her mobile phone or social media since the previous evening. Bridget had planned to spend the night at a friend's house 2 days before Robert reported her missing to the police. Robert believed she was mature enough to make such plans and assumed she had intended to meet her boyfriend that night. He didn't object to her having fun. However, after leaving home, Bridget failed to contact her father. She didn't confirm her arrival, let him know how she was, or even say goodnight. This lack of communication was unusual, as their family shared a warm and trusting relationship. According to Robert, such behavior seemed uncharacteristic and caused concern. Robert was aware of an unwritten rule often followed by the police. They are unlikely to act on a disappearance reported earlier than 24 hours after the person goes missing. With this in mind, he decided to wait before going to the police station. During this time, he repeatedly tried contacting his daughter on her mobile phone and reaching out to her friends, but all his efforts were met with silence, without any clue. When Robert provided detectives with a description of his daughter, they immediately noted Bridget's striking resemblance to the body they had found. Robert was shown photographs from the scene of the incident and heartbreakingly confirmed that it was Bridget. She was wearing the same clothes she had on when she left home. The discovery was an emotional devastation for Robert. Years earlier, he had lost his wife to a serious illness and still deeply missed her. His daughter had been his source of hope and joy, but now that light was gone too. With this confirmation, the victim was officially identified. The police then questioned Robert to piece together the events. Robert said that he last saw his daughter on April 2, 2011, when she was still at home. He had just bought her a pair of soft blue leggings, which she tried on before going out for a walk. That evening, Bridget's friend, Kendall Suo, came over for dinner with the family. After the meal, the two girls asked Robert to take them to a party. He agreed, but when they arrived, they discovered that the club was closed to young people. Unable to attend, Robert took the two girls home at around 10 p.m. Kendall left shortly after, picked up by another young man who planned to return home by midnight. Bridget and Kendall had planned to go to the bus stop to meet Bridget's boyfriend. However, Robert did not wait for the young man to arrive and went to bed. He set his alarm for midnight, and when he woke up, he found Bridget still at home. She told him that her friend was late, which worried her. Robert reassured his daughter and told her to go to bed. After seeing Bridget start getting ready for bed, he locked the door and went back to sleep. At around 3 a.m., Robert woke up feeling uneasy. He checked around the house and realized that Bridget was not there. Thinking she might have gone out with friends, he left the garage door unlocked so she could get inside without waking him. When he tried to call her to ask when she would be home, he realized that he couldn't find his phone. He thought that his daughter might have taken his mobile phone so as not to leave home without a means of communication. He tried using the internet and social media to contact her, but she didn't respond to his calls or messages. Concerned, Robert attempted to track his phone's location through GPS to ensure his daughter was safe, but he couldn't manage to do so. His anxiety grew as he realized she was unlikely to stick to her curfew. He decided to wait until morning, hoping she would return and resolve the situation on her own. Unfortunately, when he woke up on next day, Bridget was still not home. Robert began calling several of her friends and contacts, but no one could tell him exactly where she was or what had happened. By that evening, he read online that a group of teenagers on motorcycles had discovered the body of an unidentified girl near his family home. This news made Robert even more anxious. Although he tried to push away the distressing thoughts, the possibility that his daughter might be the victim tormented him. The next morning, he went to the police station and confirmed that the murdered girl was indeed his daughter. The devastating news left him shattered. He became unable to sleep or focus on work and even started keeping a loaded weapon by his bedside. After Robert's testimony, the detectives finally had their first lead. The suspect was Kendall So, a school friend of Bridget's, with whom she had spoken on the evening before her disappearance. Bridget's father stated that he had known Kendall for a long time and had never observed any signs of aggression or dangerous behavior in him. According to Robert, Kendall was a responsible high school student with no history of criminal activity or bad influences. He was well behaved, a good student, and always treated Bridget with respect. Her father felt confident trusting his daughter with Kendall, believing she was safe in his company. Robert was certain that Kendall could not be the killer. In contrast, Robert believed that a more likely suspect was Bridget's ex-boyfriend, Valley Jonathan Eason. From the start, Bridget and Jonathan had a troubled relationship. Jonathan was a bad influence and was suspected of using soft-banned substance. He was frequently involved in problematic incidents and had a history of provoking conflicts. From the beginning of their acquaintance, he often displayed threatening behavior. Later, a third person came into the picture, Zach Richards, another old friend of Bridget's, with whom she had started dating shortly before her death. Based on Robert's testimony, investigators quickly identified several suspects who needed to be thoroughly investigated. Detectives immediately began questioning these young men to determine their whereabouts at the time of the murder. The first person they approached was Kendall, one of the last people to see Bridget alive. Kendall had no prior issues with the law. When contacted by the police, he willingly agreed to come to the station and provide his statement. He confirmed Robert's account, explaining how he visited Bridget's house and then went to the club with Bridget. According to Kendall, he left the house shortly after Robert dropped them off at the club. He claimed that their plans had suddenly changed because another friend was to join them. Kendall expressed his willingness to cooperate with the investigation and agreed to provide DNA samples and fingerprints as needed. He also mentioned that on the evening in question, Bridget was upset due to a recent argument with her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan Eason. Bridget and Jonathan had been in a relationship for several months, but it had been troubled from the start. Jonathan often accused her of cheating, which eventually led to their breakup. However, he seemed to hold a grudge against her and would use any chance to hurt her feelings. The situation was further complicated because they attended the same class. The police verified Kendall's alibi, which checked out. Despite this, they kept him on the list of suspects and decided to scrutinize some of his statements further. The next person the detectives investigated was Bridget's ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Several witnesses from Bridget's close circle had mentioned him during their interviews. When the police attempted to contact Jonathan, they couldn't reach him. They decided to visit his home, but upon arrival, they found the house empty, with signs suggesting it had been abandoned in a hurry. This discovery raised serious concerns. The back wall of the family home was covered with round holes, resembling bullet holes. Based on the number of holes, investigators concluded that the bullet holes were either from a semi-automatic weapon, or the attacker has been deliberately impacting the front of the house for a long time. During their investigation, they discovered that about a week before Bridget's murder, Jonathan had been targeted by 3 unknown individuals in a car. They had opened attack on him, but he managed to hide in his room, avoiding injury. Following the attack, Jonathan reported the incident to the police. Despite the investigators' best efforts, the case remained unsolved. The only evidence collected at the scene were spent cartridges and several bullets. Neighbors revealed that Jonathan moved out the day after the attack, fearing for his safety. The police suspected that these events might be connected. On March 14, the active phase of the search for Jonathan began. He became the main suspect in this case. By that time, detectives had already managed to visit the school where he studied. Bridget also studied there. The administration reported that Jonathan had not been in class in recent days. Investigators decided to talk to other students from his class. Police officers tried to find out where Jonathan went after the attack. Detectives met Alexander Olivieri, who introduced himself as a close friend of Bridget. According to him, they had recently met, and since then, they often communicated. Alexander immediately said that during her relationship with Jonathan, Bridget repeatedly feared for her life and health, as Jonathan behaved aggressively. Even after their breakup, Jonathan continued to pursue her. They often saw each other at school, and Jonathan did not miss the opportunity to offend her. All this often ended in quarrels and confrontations. Bridget just wanted to forget about the relationship and the unpleasant breakup, but her ex-boyfriend prevented this with all his might. According to Alexander, Jonathan was capable of causing harm to Bridget. Investigators tried to find out where Alexander was on the night of Bridget's murder. According to him, he was supposed to meet her that very night. They were going to pick up her boyfriend, Zach Richards, from the bus station. Zach was returning from visiting relatives who lived in a neighboring state. Alexander claimed that he arrived late to Bridget's house with another friend named Alan Perez. Bridget had promised to wait for them near the house, but he did not see her anywhere. She ignored their calls, so they left, assuming she had either already gone to bed. They met Zach and drove around the city for several hours before returning home at around 5 a.m. According to the forensic expert, by that time, Bridget had already been killed. Alexander learned of Bridget's death from the news. Detectives then questioned Alan, who told a similar story. However, his version slightly differed. He claimed that after meeting Zach, they played computer games all night and did not drive around the city. These discrepancies raised suspicions. Detectives added Alexander and Alan to the list of suspects, as their stories did not align, and no one could confirm their alibis. Nevertheless, Jonathan remained the main witness investigators wanted to question. Detectives quickly discovered that Jonathan's mother had not left the city after the attack on their home. Instead, she had moved in with a family friend for a while her son was sent to relatives in Austin, Texas. Law enforcement officers quickly found Jonathan's mother, who admitted that her son often got into trouble because of his bad character. She confirmed that the attack on the house was clearly directed against him, as the bullets were aimed at the side of the house where his room was. According to her, Jonathan had gotten into a fight before the attack, so the attackers were most likely connected to this incident. Unfortunately, it was not possible to prove this during the investigation. The relationship between Jonathan and his mother was far from ideal. Despite sending him to Austin, she did not keep in touch with him and did not know his exact whereabouts. However, she provided the police with an address to help them begin their search for Jonathan. Help for the investigation came from an unexpected source. Alan's lawyer approached the police and stated that his client had important information regarding the case, Alan was willing to provide this information in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Detectives considered the information potentially useful and agreed to the terms. According to Alan, there was a direct connection between Bridget's murder and the drive-by attack at Jonathan's house. Alan revealed that both he and Alexander had joined the National Guard, where they learned how to handle weapons. After mastering basic skills, Alexander continued his education at school and met Bridget. Bridget confided in Alexander about her problems with her ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Together, they came up with a solution. According to Alan, in the incident that happened at Jonathan's house, it was Bridget who directly acted. Alex used his semi-automatic weapon, while Alan was also present in the car but only as an observer. Unfortunately for the entire group, Bridget started talking too much, putting everyone at risk of being exposed. On April 2, 2011, Alexander planned to meet Bridget to confront her about how her loose talk had nearly jeopardized them all. Considering his training in the National Guard and aspirations for a career in the military, Alexander feared Bridget's behavior could ruin his future. Meanwhile, Jonathan had already reported the situation to the police, and an active investigation was underway. Before that, after completing his training, Alexander began carrying a 9mm Beretta in a holster under his clothes. That evening, Alexander and Alan went to pick up Bridget from her house. They convinced her to get into the car by pretending they will to pick up her boyfriend Zach from the bus station. Initially, Bridget refused to go, so Alexander followed her into the house, determined to get her into the car by any necessary. While this was happening, Alan hid in the back seat of the Chevrolet Suburban under a large blanket. Eventually, Alexander managed to persuade Bridget to get into the car. They drove to an isolated area. On the way, Alexander started to put pressure on Bridget and accused her of the fact that her chatter could cost them all dearly. Upon arriving at the secluded location, they walked to a nearby wooded area. Alexander brought a shovel and flashlight and, together with Bridget, entered the forest. After some time, Alan got out of the car and quietly followed them, staying far enough behind to avoid being seen by Bridget. According to Alan, Alexander forced Bridget to dig, intimidating her and insisting it was urgent. While they were digging, Alexander suddenly pulled out a weapon and aimed it at the back of Bridget's head. Alan initially thought Alexander was trying to scare Bridget as a way of teaching her a lesson, but to his shock, Alexander pulled the trigger, killing her instantly. After the murder, Alexander hurried back to the car, taking the shovel and flashlight with him. He destroyed Bridget's phone and discarded the weapon, likely somewhere in the forest. Alan was stunned and confronted Alexander, angrily accusing him of what he had done. However, Alexander threatened Alan, warning him to stay silent or face consequences. Alexander then took all the items involved in the murder back to his home. Later, around 4 a.m., they picked up Bridget's boyfriend Zach from the bus station as originally planned. That night, Alexander invited a third friend to spend the night at his place. The following day, Alexander convinced Alan to work together to create a shared alibi. They agreed to stick to their story when speaking with the police. Alexander believed this plan would deceive the detectives. To further mislead the investigation, he decided to shift suspicion onto Bridget's argumentative ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. Alan admitted that he and Alexander had willingly participated in an attack at Jonathan's house to help Bridget. However, Alexander hadn't anticipated that Bridget would telling others about the incident. According to Alan's confession, Alexander saw no other solution than to kill Bridget to protect his future. Later, investigators questioned Zach, Bridget's boyfriend. Zach confessed that he had known about the attack at Jonathan's house. He also confirmed that Bridget had started sharing the story with others. Bridget had even considered posting about it on social media to intimidate Jonathan, which enraged Alexander. He repeatedly begged Bridget to drop these plans. but she refused to listen. On the evening of the meeting, Zach knew Bridget was supposed to arrive with two friends, but when the car arrived, she wasn't in it. When asked about Bridget's whereabouts, Alexander said he couldn't reach her. A few days later, Zach learned of Bridget's death. Alexander Olivieri was immediately arrested, and during a search of his home, police were unable to find the weapon believed to have been used in the car attack, as well as the weapon used to kill Bridget. However, they did find instructions for a weapon model that matched the shell casings discovered at the crime scene. Investigators also recovered a shovel that Bridget had used to dig a hole in the forest before being shot. Her DNA was confirmed to be on it. A thorough inspection of Alexander's car revealed numerous fabric fibers. However, Alexander never admitted to his actions. Instead, he attempted to shift the blame onto Alan. At this time, the prosecutor's office presented strong evidence disproving his claims. During the investigation, video recordings from 2010 were uncovered, showing Alexander demonstrating his use weapon skills with the same type of weapon used to kill Bridget, and in the attack at Jonathan's house. FBI agents took an active part in the investigation. A few days before the trial, they presented the results of fiber analysis conducted on materials collected from Alexander's car. The fibers matched the artificial fur on the victim's clothing. Bridget had been wearing a bright and distinctive outfit, making it easy to trace the source of the fibers. Additional evidence has strengthened the case against Alexander. Alexander's lawyer advised him to remain composed during the trial. He chose not to testify and never confessed to the murder. His cold demeanor made him appear calculating and unfeeling. On August 1, 2012, Alexander was found guilty and sentenced to 60 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Bridget's father deemed the sentence fair and expressed hope that Alexander would never be released. As promised by the police, Alan was not prosecuted for any of the incidents described. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Magwad family. The Magwad family consisted of parents Cruz and Lila and their teenage children, 16-year-old Louis and 18-year-old Gwen. Louis Magwad, the youngest member of the family, was known for his charisma. Despite his calm nature, he had an incredible energy about him. People often sharing their deepest feelings with Louis because he radiated warmth and understanding that made others feel comfortable opening up. He was accepting, inquisitive, and creative, enjoying activities like playing guitar, reading, and drawing. After finishing high school, Louis hoped to study law. Gwen, the older sister, was known for her hardworking and lively nature. From a young age, she had climbed through all the ranks of the Scout movement, racking up an impressive collection of badges for her achievements. During her final years of high school, Gwen took pre-med classes at a nearby university, aiming to pursue a career in the medical field. In her free time, she devoted herself to volunteering, always ready to help those in need. At a mutual friends party, Gwen met Janice, who worked as a nanny. During the event, Janice was busy taking care of children. Gwen was surprised to learn that someone her age was already working. As they became friends, Gwen asked Janice how she became a nanny. Janice revealed that her parents had abandoned her on a cargo ship, where she was later found by a kind stranger. This kind-hearted person tried to find Janice's family by posting her information and photo on social media and the internet, but no one claimed her. As a result, Janice ended up in the care of the Philippine Social Services. Her first clear memory was feeling lost on a big ship, longing for a carefree childhood and the comfort of a mother after a small fall. Janice aspired to academic success so she could go to college, but her circumstances forced her to work instead of study. Gwen and Janice grew closer as they shared various activities, including experimenting with makeup and hairstyles, taking photos, and creating TikTok videos. While filming a dance routine they had choreographed, Louis, the playful younger brother, would often make jokes from behind the camera, causing everyone to laugh. Their friendship was so enjoyable that the Magwad siblings suggested to their parents that Janice be welcomed into their close-knit family. One day, the siblings called a family meeting in the living room to discuss adding a fifth member to their household. They proposed taking in Gwen's 17-year-old friend, Janice, an orphan who had been working as a live-in maid in various homes since she was 8 years old, without any opportunity for education. Louis and Gwen asked their parents to allow Janice to live with them, offering to share household responsibilities in exchange for providing her with a stable home and emotional support. Cruz and Lila had always taught their children to help those in need, so after careful consideration, they agreed to give Janice a chance at a better life as part of their family. In the Philippines, a young woman without proper resources or support could end up homeless. The Magwad family, deeply religious, saw their ability to help others as a blessing from God. They welcomed Janice into their family through a formal adoption process, completing all necessary legal procedures. Mr. Magwad worked as an elementary school teacher and was highly respected by his colleagues. His wife, Lila, was the principal at the same school. Although their income was modest, they were considered wealthy in their community because they owned land and could provide for their children financially. Gwen and Louis's parents were very strict and responsible. They avoided spoiling their children with expensive gifts and did not give them too much freedom. Each family member was given specific tasks to do around the house and was expected to help with household chores. The children were also expected to do well in school, attend church on Sundays, and be supportive of each other. Despite their parents' tough approach, Gwen and Louis truly admired and appreciated their parents' caring and loving nature. The Magwad family's decision to adopt Janice highlighted their close and supportive relationship. After the adoption, Janice moved into Louis's old room, and he began sleeping on the living room sofa. The family welcomed Janice with open arms, making her feel like one of their own. They took care of her basic needs and enrolled her in school, so she no longer had to worry about supporting herself. This was the first time Janice could focus on being young and exploring her future aspirations. The adoption strengthened the bond between the siblings. They continued to enjoy activities together, such as photography sessions and family vacations, and returned from their breaks feeling refreshed. However, the transition wasn't without its difficulties. Many adoptive parents face challenges when adopting a new child to the family. The child has to get used to a new environment, learn new rules, and develop trust, which takes time. Fortunately, the Magwads benefited from Cruz and Lila's education, patience, and ability to relate to their children. The incident occurred a few months after Janice joined the Magwad household, which had a small pig farm. After selling a piglet, Cruz had $1,200 left over, which he kept in a container in the living room for emergencies. However, when Cruz's elderly parents were hospitalized that month and he needed money for medical expenses, he checked the container and found it was completely empty. Each member of the household strongly denied taking the money. Since the Magwads were not very rich, they conducted a thorough search of their home to find the missing funds. After hours of searching, one of the siblings found a hidden compartment in Janice's backpack. Janice was overwhelmed and confessed to taking the money, revealing that she had hidden the $200 in a secret pouch she had made in her bag. She had trouble explaining why she did it and started crying. Cruz was not angry, just confused. Janice was afraid of being punished and possibly kicked out for breaking the trust of the Magwads family. However, the Magwads family understood that Janice had a very different childhood compared to Gwen and Louis. They knew that Janice had often had to fend for herself, and as a result, it wasn't uncommon for children from orphanages to struggle with stealing when they first joined a new household. This behavior often comes from a deep-seated need to survive, a fear of being abandoned and left with nothing. This causes people to stockpile resources for the future. The Magwad family felt disappointed, but they didn't think the situation was extremely serious. To them, it was similar to times when their own child made mistakes. Now that Janice was a part of their family, they would not abandon her. They tried to reassure her, making it clear that she didn't have to worry about her future because she was a valued member of their household. After this upsetting event, the family grew closer and more united. When school shifted online, Gwen helped Janice with her studies. On December 10, 2021, as their parents were getting ready for work, Janice called them Mom and Dad for the first time, which should have been a special moment. But something unexpected was revealed. Janice, their adopted child, was not an orphan as they thought. She had been secretly communicating with her biological mother through social media. On December 10, 2021, Cruz found his two children lying still in the living room. He knelt beside them, trying to find a pulse, but they had none. Overcome with grief, he looked up to the heavens, wondering why they were taken from him. He then remembered his third child and searched for her. Cruz went upstairs, hoping not to find another lifeless body, and called out for Janice. He heard a door creak open and rushed into the room, frantically checking her for injuries to make sure she was safe. Janice was unharmed, but for some unknown reason, she was completely soaked. For a moment, Cruz was overcome with fear, mistakenly thinking the liquid was blood. Janice, still trying to catch her breath, told her father that 3 people had broken into their house and attacked Gwen and Louis. She had run to her room and hidden under the bed, frozen with fear as she listened to the screams coming from downstairs. She felt helpless, unable to do anything to help her siblings until the screaming stopped. Despite the chaos, Janice had decided to take a bath, which seemed like a strange thing to do after what had just happened. Cruz was confused by Janice's actions, but he tried to comfort her and stay strong, even though he felt like his world was falling apart. Lila arrived immediately after the police, finding Janice soaked in water and tears on the veranda. She hugged the girl tightly, thanking God that she was safe, and then asked where Gwen and Louis were. Cruz had the difficult task of telling Lila the devastating news that 2 of her children had been attacked. As the principal of an elementary school, Lila was usually calm and in control, even in emergencies, but now she was completely broken. She had no idea what to do, no plan, and no answers. Lila and Janice held each other, crying, as their home was cordoned off with police tape, marking it as a crime scene. The police found several potential weapons in the living room, including a bloody baseball bat, a hammer, multiple kitchen knives, and broken glass bottles. One of the knives was located near the entrance. The authorities collected and documented all of these items to see if they matched the injuries on the Magwad siblings' bodies. Gwen had multiple stab wounds on her face, chest, and abdomen. The fact that she was struck in the face suggests that the killer may have had a personal motive, such as jealousy. The brutality of these incidents is extremely difficult to understand. Gwen's body showed defensive injuries on her hands and wrists, indicating that she fought back intensely until the end. Her hair was matted with dried blood, and one of her ears was severed. The coroner found 51 stab wounds on Louis's body. Such extreme violence goes beyond simply taking a life, suggesting a deep-seated personal hatred. Their bodies were so severely mutilated that mortuary staff had to close the wounds before their parents could make funeral arrangements. The initial investigation was based on testimonies that suggested the criminals targeted a wealthy family in the area, believing no one would be home. However, when detectives saw valuable items like a TV, phone, and laptop in plain sight, they dismissed the burglary theory. Another theory involved a family dispute over land, as Lila had siblings who claimed ownership. Despite rumors of a dispute, investigators found no evidence to support this theory and eventually abandoned it. The community and family sought answers, fearing for their safety after the brutal attack that didn't even spare teenagers. The entire investigative unit focused on solving the crime, and the mayor offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to the attacker's arrest. Detectives conducted a wider search of the house and surrounding area. During this search, they discovered a small pond-like stream near the family of Magwat house. Fortunately, they spotted a plastic bag stuck on a branch in the stream. The bag contained blood-stained clothes that were probably worn by the perpetrator after the crime. After finding this evidence, the police thoroughly researched the Magwat family house for any potential clues or suspicious items. Meanwhile, online users weren't convinced by the burglary or land dispute theories, so they started their own investigation. Although it's unconfirmed, they believe the crime was committed by one of the survivors. Normally, such speculation would be hurtful to those who have already suffered, but in this case, the online users found some evidence to support their claims. For example, many found it suspicious that Janice took a bath after hiding from the attackers instead of checking on her siblings or alerting someone for help. Online investigators think that Janice might have taken the bath to wash off her siblings' blood after harming them. Cruz Magwat eventually realized that Janice's actions were unusual after the initial shock of what happened wore off. At first, he was too relieved to find his adopted daughter safe to think about her behavior. However, he found it strange that she didn't respond when he was desperately calling for his children, considering their home was small and she should have heard him. She only appeared after Cruz found the bodies of Gwen and Lewis, which raised even more suspicions. The inconsistencies in Janice's account raised doubts about her. Her claim that the attackers thoroughly searched her room without finding her seemed implausible. Blood droplets found in her room, which she attributed to the killers, added to the suspicion. The timeline of events also raised questions. Janice messaged her family group at 2:48 p.m., nearly an hour after her siblings' estimated time of death at 2 p.m. This delay in seeking help, coupled with her use of fun emojis in a social media post during a supposedly traumatic situation, seemed at odds with the behavior expected from someone in genuine distress. Amid this period, Lila was utterly devastated as detectives proceeded with their scrutiny. She grieved profoundly for her lost offspring. As her sorrow momentarily subsided, she found herself simply curling up, lying in wait for the grief and the sharp sting of loss to overwhelm her anew. Seeking a diversion, Lila began tidying the home, initiating with Janice's chamber. During this task, she encountered an ID card unfamiliar to her within their home. Swiftly delivering it to the authorities, the ID was that of a 17-year-old male known primarily by the moniker Marlon, whose actual name was withheld. Lila had no acquaintance with Marlon, nor had she ever encountered him. Yet, neighbors witnessed the youth en route to the Magwat family residence on the day in question. A shopkeeper also recognized him, providing directions to Cruz and Lila's abode. Additionally, a motorcyclist reported transporting Marlon to the location on the day the tragedy struck. This discovery marked a significant breakthrough in the investigation, prompting the question of how Marlon's ID found its way into Janice's quarters. When officials called Janice in for questioning, they didn't expect her to be able to explain the presence of the ID of Marlon in her room. However, Janice calmly acknowledged knowing the boy and then, through tears, admitted her involvement in the tragic death of her siblings. Due to her status as a minor, Janice's confession wasn't made public, which left some ambiguity about the extent of her involvement in the tragic events. It's known that Marlon, who worked at a church handling maintenance for services, had some kind of relationship with Janice, although media reports didn't detail the nature of their connection or how they came to know each other. The police discovered a photo on Janice's social media with another young man, which led to an investigation. This young man, presumably her boyfriend, had seen Janice's online plea for help and tried to contact her that day. When he called, someone answered but didn't speak, so he hung up thinking Janice might have exaggerated the situation. The investigation took a turn when the police located Marlon. His denial of involvement became untenable when Gwen's phone was found in his possession. To make matters worse, he had recently been arrested for possession of illegal substances. Despite her mother giving her up to the Magwad family, who thought they were taking in an orphan, Janice actually kept in secret contact with her biological mother, Michelle, and with Juanita through social media. This revealed that her story was more complex than initially thought. Janice's childhood was marked by great hardships, with her family struggling to meet basic needs like food. Her diet consisted mainly of sweet potatoes due to lack of resources. The situation was made worse by her father, who frequently drank to cope with financial problems, further increasing the family's difficulties. The details about how Janice became separated from her family are still unclear. It's unknown whether she was abandoned or simply got lost, but it's certain that she was found alone on a cargo ship on September 22, 2013. The Magwads offered Janice a loving family environment that she had never experienced before. Seeing the care and protection that Gwen and Louis received from their parents, in contrast to her own traumatic childhood, Janice experienced a mix of emotions. Although she was adopted, she received the same affection as the Magwads' biological children and was expected to contribute to household chores in the same way. Janice struggled to cope with expectations, shared affection, and family responsibilities. She craved exclusive attention and wanted to make the most of everything the Magwads could offer. Her desire to enjoy the perks of being an only child clashed with the reality of her situation, where love and material benefits had to be shared with other family members. Janice knew she could never surpass Gwen and Louis in the eyes of the Magwads due to their biological connection, and she saw eliminating them as the only solution to this inequality. The subsequent investigation uncovered text messages in Tagalog on Janice's phone, suspected to be conversations with Marlon, revealing her dark intentions. In these messages, she expressed the desire to end the lives of 7 people without naming them and believed that God would forgive her for her actions if she repented. 6 days after the attack, on December 16th, authorities arrested Janice and Marlon. Due to their young age, they were treated as juvenile offenders and not placed in regular prisons. In separate trials, each received a 10-year sentence for assaulting Gwen and an additional 22 years for murdering 16-year-old Louis. The relatively lenient sentences, given because of their age, caused public outrage and strong disapproval from the Magwad parents. Seeking justice, Cruz and Lila appealed to the media and national officials, calling for a review of the court decisions. During an emotional interview, Lila initially expressed her willingness to forgive Janice, believing her terrible actions were a result of her disadvantaged upbringing and limited opportunities. However, everything changed when Lila met Janice face-to-face while she was in custody. As Lila looked into the eyes of the girl she had once considered her own, she hoped to see signs of remorse or inner conflict. Instead, she was met with a cold, detached stare filled with resentment and devoid of empathy or regret. This shocking encounter forced Lila to withdraw her offer of forgiveness, realizing that the girl they had once welcomed as a blessing had actually brought them an unimaginable nightmare. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jennifer Ertman v. Elizabeth Pena. Jennifer Ertman was born on August 15, 1978, and Elizabeth Pena was born on June 21, 1977. They live in Houston, Texas, and are both high school students. They have been best friends since childhood, sharing a strong bond. Elizabeth's father later commented that Jennifer was a wonderful person, with her positive, caring, and intelligent nature. Both girls had high expectations for them from their parents. They loved fashion, enjoyed jewelry and makeup, and were active, often playing basketball together. Jennifer and Elizabeth enjoyed a vibrant teenage life filled with friends, goals, and dreams. They spent all their free time together, hanging out with the same groups and attending the same parties. On June 24, 1993, they were headed to a pool party at the home of their friend Gina, as they often did. The two girls planned to meet at Elizabeth's house. Elizabeth was 16 years old, while Jennifer was 14. Jennifer's father, Randy, drove her to Elizabeth's house around 4:45 p.m. They dressed up together in preparation for the party before making their way to Gina's. Elizabeth's mother drove the girls to the party at 8 p.m. Their curfew was 11:30 p.m. They were responsible teenagers who respected this rule and planned to be home on time that night, having promised their parents that they would not be late. However, as the evening progressed, Jennifer and Elizabeth became so engrossed in their fun that they lost track of time. By 2 a.m., they realized they would be late for curfew and hurried out of Gina's house. The girls had two ways to get home. The first option was to take their usual route, which went through a busy street. Although it was late, this was the safest choice, even though it took longer. The second option was to cut through the local park and walk along the train tracks, which would save them 10 to 15 minutes. At that time, cell phones were not common. The girls did not have phones, so they could not contact their families to let them know they were on their way home. In addition, people were generally less aware of crime at that time. The girls and their parents did not think about the dangers. People often left their doors unlocked because they trusted each other. Without considering the risks, the Elizabeth, Jennifer chose the shorter route to get home faster. This meant walking through dark park alleys and crossing the railway embankment before reaching Elizabeth's house. Unfortunately, this decision had tragic consequences. Jennifer's mother woke up around 4 a.m. and noticed that the light in her daughter's bedroom was still on, which was unusual because Jennifer always turned it off at night. Concerned, she checked Jennifer's room and found it empty, which worried her even more. To avoid causing panic, she tried calling the parents of Jennifer's best friend, Elizabeth, thinking that Jennifer might have spent the night there. Unfortunately, she couldn't reach them. Concerned about their daughter, Jennifer's parents tried to contact Gina, where the girls had stayed the night before, to see if they had stayed overnight at her house. However, they were unable to contact her either, as no one answered the phone at Gina's house. They decided to start looking for the girls. First, they went to Elizabeth's house, but no one answered the door. Then Jennifer's father went to Gina's house and talked to her. He was surprised to find that the girls were not there either. Gina told him that Jennifer and Elizabeth had left her house around 2 a.m. and she had not seen them since. The man returned to Elizabeth's house and discovered that her parents had not seen her since the evening. In a state of panic, the family called 911 to report both girls missing. In response, the police immediately began searching for the two girls, as they had gone missing after dark and no one knew where they were. The idea that the girls might have run away was not considered. All their belongings and money were still at home, and they had no reason to make such a drastic choice. Both girls came from good families. The parents wasted no time. They not only searched for their daughters but also printed flyers with their photos to distribute throughout the city. Family members canvassed the area, asking anyone they met if they had seen the two girls out at night. Unfortunately, no one had noticed anything unusual for 4 days. There was a tense silence, and no progress was. The police received some tips, but these did not lead anywhere. The crucial 48-hour window had passed, despite the family's hopes for the safe return of their daughters. Police feared the worst. On the 4th day after the teenagers' disappearance, the police station received a troubling call. An anonymous caller claimed that the bodies of Jennifer and Elizabeth were in a clearing in the forest behind the park where they had taken a shortcut. The police quickly arrived on the scene and began searching the area as the exact location was unclear. They crossed a railway embankment and from a distance spotted suspicious objects in a small clearing surrounded by trees. As they approached, they were horrified to discover that the objects were two bodies, lying side by side. Both bodies were lying on their backs, naked, and had decomposed significantly due to the summer heat. The condition of the victims made identification very difficult. The ground was covered with numerous fresh footprints, indicating that several people were involved. There were signs of dragging and a struggle, but the police underestimated the brutality of the situation and the horrors the girls endured in their final moments. They reached out to the media to share the grim discovery. At that moment, Jennifer's father was giving another interview, appealing to the public for help, when he overheard the shocking news. While authorities worked to identify the bodies, the grieving father quickly drove to the park where the crime occurred. Overcome with grief, he tried to push through police lines, believing his daughter was among the victims. Officers struggled to restrain him when he demanded to know the victim's hair color. However, officers were unable to provide any information. The bodies were badly decomposed, making identification impossible, but they feared they could be Jennifer and Elizabeth. All the evidence collected was submitted to the medical examiner's office, and the bodies were examined by forensic experts. They determined that the deceased were 18-year-old Jennifer Ertman and 18-year-old Elizabeth Pena. The identification was made using dental records, as heat and insects had caused extensive decomposition within just 4 days. Multiple prints were found at the crime scene, and police determined that the prints belonged to several people. The exact number was difficult to determine because the prints were mixed up. A detailed analysis during the autopsy revealed that both teenagers died from strangulation. At that time, DNA testing was not commonly used, and there was no existing database for comparisons. Additionally, an anonymous witness who had helped locate the bodies appeared to have more information that could be vital for the investigation. The police tracked down the address from which the call was made and promptly went to speak with the informant to advance the investigation. The police arrived at the home of brothers Joe and Peter Cantu, finding only Joe there. He quickly confessed to being the anonymous informant who had called the police. Joe disclosed that his brother Peter and 5 of his friends had violently attacked 2 schoolgirls. The officers conducted a search of the house and discovered several pieces of jewelry that clearly belonged to females. Victims' relatives later confirmed that the jewelry belonged to Elizabeth and Jennifer. They also found traces of DNA belonging to the girls on the items. Based on Joe's information, police were able to piece together the events of the violent incident. Elizabeth and Jennifer were walking through the park after 2 a.m. when they were approached by several members of the gang. The gang ranged in age from 14 to 18, including the oldest members, Jose Medellin, Derek Sean O'Brien, Efren Perez, Venancio Medellin, and Peter Cantu, 18, along with Raul Villarreal, 17, who had just completed his gang initiation. As the 2 girls walked silently without stopping, Elizabeth was a few steps ahead of Jennifer as they headed towards their destination, just over a kilometer away. Suddenly, Jose Medellin appeared from the shadows. He tried to grab Elizabeth, but she quickly dodged and sped up. However, he was determined and caught up to her, grabbing her by the neck and dragging her towards where his friends were gathered. At that moment, Elizabeth was left alone in the dark park. Hearing Elizabeth's screams, Jennifer decided to help her. This was a grave mistake, as she was unable to escape and call the police in time. Jennifer ran after Elizabeth and fell into the hands of a dangerous group. Jennifer probably underestimated the situation and did not realize that Jose was part of a group of 6. She was caught and thrown to the ground next to Elizabeth, and then the group of criminals forced both girls to strip and attack them together for an hour. Forensic experts discovered that the schoolgirls fought back fiercely despite the terrifying situation. They scratched, bit, and kicked their attackers. Later, police found evidence of the girls' resistance, including bite marks and scratches on the assailants. Unfortunately, this bravery did not save them. After the brutal assault, the gang leader, 18-year-old Peter Cantu, decided not to let the schoolgirls go, fearing they would identify him and report him to the police. He ordered the others to kill Elizabeth and Jennifer. One gang member, Raul, forced Jennifer to kneel. Exhausted, she complied, and he and Derek placed a red belt around her neck. They strangled her with all their strength until the belt broke, and she stopped moving. Unsatisfied, they continued to strangle her with shoelaces to ensure she was dead. Elizabeth was forced to witness this horrific scene and realized her own fate was sealed. Desperate, she pleaded with her attackers to let her go, promising not to report them. However, the criminals remained unyielding. The exhausted and injured girl couldn't run far before her attackers caught her and threw her to the ground. They began kicking her, causing several broken ribs and knocked out teeth. After Peter, Jose, and Derek strangled her with shoelaces, they stepped on the throats of both girls to make sure they couldn't survive. The gang then took the jewelry and money from their bodies. After the attack, the gang members, except for Derek, went to Peter Cantu's house, where his younger brother Joe and his wife, Christina, were present. Christina noticed that the boys returned late at night with blood on their clothes. They appeared tired and nervous, as if they had just been in a fight. When she asked what had happened, the gang members claimed they were just having some fun. Yet, they did not hide their actions. Instead, they recounted the details of the incident to Joe and Christina with a sense of pride, even laughing about it. Jose remarked that if he had a gun, it would have been easier. Joe and his wife were not pleased with the story. However, they chose to handle the situation carefully to avoid escalating tensions. Instead of arguing or making accusations, they listened intently to ensure that the criminals were being truthful. After the gang members split the stolen goods and left, Joe and Christina left alone. Christina shared her anger and fear with her husband over the incident. Having been a victim of gang rape in her youth, the story had a profound impact on her. Christina convinced her husband Joe that they needed to report the criminals to prevent them from committing more crimes. Joe was initially hesitant because he did not want to betray his brother to the police. He was also worried that the rest of the gang would retaliate against them. However, Christina reassured him that he could remain anonymous when contacting the police, which would help protect their identities. On the fourth day after the girls went missing, thanks to Joe's information, the girls' bodies were discovered. Joe informed the police about the case, which confirmed his testimony. Peter took the victim's jewelry and other valuables, including a ring with the letter E that belonged to Elizabeth. In a misguided move, Jose intended to give the ring to his girlfriend, unaware of the seriousness of the situation and how inappropriate the gift was. In addition, the police found a torn red belt in the brothers' home, which matched the only weapon found near the victims' bodies, which was determined to be the murder weapon. On June 29, 1993, police arrested all 6 individuals involved in the brutal murder. When the police approached Derek, Beffron attempted to flee through the back door but was quickly apprehended as he was surrounded. He was charged with double murder with aggravating circumstances. During his arrest, Derek asked if his detention was related to the 2 girls, which led the officers to confirm their initial tip was accurate. At the police station, Derek confessed that he had given Jose the red belt used to strangle Jennifer and mentioned he had kept a piece of the belt for himself. The police also discovered DNA evidence of the murdered girl in their house. Raul, who had joined the gang the night of the murder, was similarly arrested. With substantial evidence, along with the testimonies from the suspects and informants, they were all charged with double murder, rape, and torture. During the hearing, each person involved in the crime was carefully evaluated. The victim's family endured the painful details of the horrific act as they sought the maximum punishment possible under Texas law. Jennifer's father later recounted that when he arrived at the crime scene and discovered the girls' bodies, he saw Derek smile at him, wave, and then walk away. At the time, overwhelmed with panic and shock, he didn't think much of it. Only later did he realize Derek was taunting him about losing his only daughter. Everyone agreed on the guilt of the defendants. As a result, 5 out of the 6 were sentenced to death. The only one who avoided the death penalty was Venancio Medellin. At just 14 years old, he cooperated with the investigation and testified against the other perpetrators, including his brother Jose. Being a minor, Venancio was convicted differently from the others, who were tried as adults. He received a 40-year prison sentence, meaning he could be released when he turns 54. At the end of the trial, another murder surfaced that the accused might have committed. Authorities were informed about dismembered remains, implicating Derek and Efren in the unsolved murder of a girl named Patricia Lopez, who had been raped and tortured to death. Patricia's body was discovered 6 months before the massacre of Jennifer and Elizabeth, also near the forest. The nature of her murder was similar. Police found that 2 attackers had brutally beaten, raped, and mutilated her before disposing of her body. DNA from the victim was collected and analyzed, but the investigation initially failed to identify the culprits due to a lack of matches in the database. However, upon re-examination, male DNA found at the crime scene matched Jose's. Additionally, a beer can was discovered, and Derek's fingerprint was found on it. Despite this evidence, he was never charged with Patricia's murder. Derek later gave a recorded confession, admitting he was present during Patricia's murder but claimed he was too drunk to comprehend the situation and insisted he did not participate in her torture. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him with the massacre, which was considered unnecessary given the severity of the double murder for which he had already received a death sentence. During the trial, much of the questioning focused on the culpability of Raul Villarreal, who had joined the gang that night. Raul's attorneys urged the jury not to compare him to gang leader Peter Cantu in terms of culpability. However, the defense convincingly demonstrated that he did not participate in the madness. He was, however, present at the scene of the crime and did not stop anyone or leave. This case marked a significant moment in the U.S. judicial system, as it was the first time defendants were sentenced to death for such crimes. The shocking nature of the events received extensive media coverage and instilled fear in the local community, prompting many to avoid the area. The families of Elizabeth and Jennifer attended every trial and execution of the criminals involved. Derek, one of the defendants, was executed in July 2006. He was the only one to express remorse before his execution, apologizing to the victims' families and calling it the worst mistake of his life. Jennifer's father, Randy, remained steadfast despite Derek's remorse. Many opponents of the death penalty, including the wealthy, argue that lethal injection is a cruel punishment. However, the victim's parents disagree. Randy expressed his grief after testifying about the torment his daughter endured and her tragic death. Just before Derek's execution, Randy boldly stated that he wished Derek the same pain that Jennifer had gone through. Jose Medellin's execution also sparked international debate. As a Mexican citizen, Jose did not contact his consulate for protection before his trial, despite having that right under the Vienna Convention. That year, the U.S. opted out of mandatory jurisdiction, but Mexico still filed a lawsuit against the U.S. The International Court of Justice ordered a hearing to assess whether Jose's lack of consular support negatively impacted his defense. This situation received significant media attention and involved human rights organizations, which heightened its complexity. In 2005, then-President George W. Bush ordered hearings on the matter. However, the governor of Texas resisted this order and took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, which decided that only the U.S. Congress has the authority to make decisions in such cases. In July 2005, the International Court of Justice intervened by halting José's execution and calling for a hearing with the consulate. Despite this, the governor of Texas insisted that they were not obligated to follow the International Court's decision. Opponents of the death penalty protested against the upcoming execution. However, the families of the victims insisted that lethal injection was appropriate for such a brutal crime. It is difficult to believe that the perpetrator was still in prison, and many wondered how the situation would resolve. He likely hoped for a pardon before his execution. On August 5, 2008, the Supreme Court dismissed his final appeal. In the moments leading up to the execution, the governor of Texas decided not to postpone it, despite requests from Mexico and Washington. José Medellín was executed 2 years after Derek's death. On August 17, 2010, the Peter Cantu made a final statement before his execution. Following this, the victims' parents expressed their satisfaction with the court's decision and the execution. They also hoped that the other participants in the horrific crime, who avoided lethal injection, would spend their lives in prison while awaiting their sentences. The Supreme Court enacted a law banning the execution of minors, which led to Raul Vellier receiving a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 2029. This tragedy had a profound effect on the entire Houston community. It reminded residents of the ongoing issue of gang violence, similar to past struggles. To honor the memory of the Jennifer and Elizabeth, a memorial was established at the site of the horrific initiation, and another memorial was placed at their school. Randy believed that, regardless of their age, juvenile offenders who committed such heinous acts should never be released. Randy frequently spoke to the media, vowing to fight tirelessly to prevent the release of anyone involved in this brutal crime. He dedicated his life to this cause and remained committed to his promise. Sadly, Randy passed away from lung cancer in 2014 at the age of 61. His efforts significantly influenced the protection of victims' rights, leading to changes in legislation. Thanks to Randy's relentless advocacy, the families of the victims gained more rights in the courtroom. During hearings, Randy was open about his feelings and showed clear hostility towards criminals. His actions drew both support and criticism. Victim families were not allowed to speak in court to share their feelings. However, after this incident, the system became more lenient. In addition, it was forbidden to attend the executions of murderers. Nevertheless, Randy managed to eliminate this restriction, and it was precisely thanks to his persistence that the families of the victims were present at all the lethal injections. He believed this allowed the world to be made a little better. The remaining gang members in prison continue to request parole, hoping for eventual release. Their most recent application was denied. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Danielle Finley Jones. Love is a beautiful emotion that inspires books, music, and movies. However, when love becomes distorted and comes from a troubled person, it can be extremely harmful, destroying lives, careers, and families. Danielle Finley Jones, 31, lives with her family in the Sydney suburb of Calgary, Australia. She works as a teacher and is dedicated to supporting her students. Since she was a child, Danielle has played soccer at a local club, which has become an important part of her life. During her soccer journey, she became the team captain. Over the years, Danielle has earned the respect of club staff and players. Her leadership and management skills have helped guide athletes to success. Danielle is known as a kind, feminine, strong, and intelligent girl. She has become a role model for many. When the Football Association, she is a member of organized a week dedicated to women's football. Danielle became the representative of the event. Danielle faced difficulties when her parents separated. However, these difficulties taught her valuable life lessons. Since she was a child, Danielle has been very close to her mother, with whom she continued to live after her parents divorced. She also has a strong relationship with her brother, Blake. They spend all their free time together, hanging out in bars and occasionally attending parties during the week. Danielle works as a teacher, and on weekends she is active in sports and socializing with friends and family. Danielle has a vibrant social life and is doing well in her career. She prioritizes her career as a teacher and an athlete. Now, she is ready to find a relationship. To start this new chapter, she joined a dating app. At this stage, she wants to create a loving family and have children. After spending time chatting with different people online, 31-year-old Danielle met 30-year-old Ashley Gaddy, who works in the commercial sector. In early December 2022, they went on 2 dates and quickly felt attracted to each other. Danielle's mother noticed that her daughter was starting to build a serious relationship. Although Danielle did not have much experience in relationships, she sensed Ashley's serious intentions and felt excited about it. Ashley seemed like a kind, thoughtful, and intelligent person. However, some of her friends began to notice worrying signs in their relationship. Ashley seemed jealous and controlling, especially in the early stages of the relationship. Danielle found this aspect exciting. She saw it as a new challenge. Unfortunately, this move eventually led to tragedy. In December 2022, Danielle and Ashley went on their 3rd date. Danielle decided to do it during the Christmas holiday, which she usually spent with her friends. This was the first time Ashley had met Danielle's closest friends. She was a little nervous about how her friends and Ashley would get along. They all gathered at a bar in a local park on the outskirts of town, where Danielle ordered drinks and snacks. Everyone had a great time together. Afterwards, everyone described Ashley and Danielle's relationship as loving and warm. Throughout the evening, they hugged, smiled, and enjoyed their time together. This was the first time her friends had seen Danielle in such a serious relationship, and they were very happy for her, especially since she had been single for a long time. The group then started playing a question and answer game. However, things took an unexpected turn when Danielle and Ashley got into an argument. A few minutes ago, when asked about whether Danielle had ever been intimate with anyone, when Danielle answered yes, Ashley became upset. Not only was he unhappy, but he also cursed Danielle, shocking everyone around. Ashley accused her of cheating on him, which made him extremely angry. He abruptly stood up and left the table, but the conflict did not stop there. Danielle's phone was flooded with angry messages. Ashley insulted her in every way. Danielle decided to go out and try to calm Ashley, who was still lingering outside the bar. Danielle went out for about 20 minutes to talk to Ashley. Then she returned to the table with Ashley. According to friends, the anger had died down, as no one wanted to stir things up any further. The group continued drinking, and eventually Danielle and Ashley went to a friend named Taylor's house in Cranebrook, where they planned to spend the night. By 11:30 p.m., they had arrived and were ready for bed. Danielle and her boyfriend were given a guest room in the basement. Everything seemed peaceful, as if no conflict had occurred at the bar. However, in the middle of the night, Taylor was startled awake by a strange noise coming from the bedroom. His girlfriend also woke up, and after listening for a few minutes, they concluded that Ashley and Danielle were being intimate. They laughed about it together before going back to sleep. The next morning, Taylor and his girlfriend woke up later than usual, while Ashley and Danielle were still asleep. They chose not to wake anyone, because they were unsure when Ashley and Danielle had gone to bed. After a while, Taylor noticed that the basement bedroom was very quiet, so he decided to go down and check. Taylor knocked on the door but got no answer. He then carefully opened the door. Taylor noticed that there was no one in the bed. Confused, Taylor entered the room and saw someone lying on the floor under a blanket. When he pulled the blanket back, he saw Danielle. Her face was severely disfigured, and there was no sign that Ashley was in the room. Taylor rushed out of the basement in shock and told his girlfriend what had happened. He was shocked to learn that an assault had occurred in his home. His girlfriend quickly called the police to report that their friend was unresponsive. The friend had severe bruising to her face and visible marks on her neck. While waiting for the police, they attempted to give Danielle first aid, but to no avail. When the police arrived, they confirmed that Danielle, 31, was dead. Her body was sent for an autopsy, which determined that she had died from strangulation and that she had been repeatedly struck, primarily in the face and head. Danielle suffered multiple blunt force injuries. It was determined that her attacker had wrestled her to the ground, sat on her, and covered her mouth so that she could not scream or breathe. As he did so, he began beating her, possibly with his bare hands, until she was asphyxiated. He continued to attack her shortly afterwards, as evidenced by bruises on her body. Ashley, 30, became the prime suspect in the attack, especially since he had been at the crime scene earlier. Initially, police thought that the time of the noises heard by Taylor and his girlfriend was when the murder occurred. No personal belongings were missing and the house was intact, making the robbery theory unlikely. Police discovered that the criminal had escaped through a window, leaving fingerprints on the window frame. These fingerprints belonged to Ashley. Later, neighbors reported seeing a man running away from the house at 5 a.m. During this time, police obtained a recording of Ashley's phone conversation with his mother after the incident. In this conversation, he admitted that he had overnight with Danielle in separate beds. He claimed that Danielle had asked him to be intimate, but he had refused. Throughout the conversation, he repeatedly claimed that he had done nothing wrong, attempting to convince his mother that he was innocent. He explained that he had woken up at 9:30 a.m. to find Danielle lying on the floor, severely beaten and not breathing. However, he maintained that he had not heard or witnessed the attack. Ashley claimed that he had been completely surprised by the situation and had panicked, which caused him to leave the scene. Ashley was extremely afraid of being wrongly convicted. Thanks to a phone call, the police were able to locate him in a remote mountainous area south of the city. When the police arrived at the house where he was staying, Ashley refused to surrender or admit his guilt. Instead, he climbed onto an observation deck and threatened to jump if the police did not leave him alone. To prevent a tragedy and ensure that he faced justice, a negotiation team was brought in. Despite this, Ashley stood his ground and asked the police to back off. The negotiators talked to him for 12 hours without a resolution. Finally, just before midnight, Ashley allowed an officer to approach him. Sensing that he was about to jump off the observation deck, the officers quickly grabbed him. Ashley, clearly distressed, fought back against the police. He was quickly arrested for Danielle's murder. Given Ashley's unstable emotional state, the first priority was to stabilize him so he could answer important questions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Ashley with a major depressive disorder and a tendency to self-harm. Ashley was arrested and placed on special watch due to concerns that he might attempt to take his own life. Police were not only shocked by the brutal murder, but also shocked by the fact that Danielle was not Ashley's first victim. He had a history of violent behavior, having assaulted his mother and sisters, who chose to endure the abuse rather than report it to the police for fear of retaliation. Between 2016 and 2021, at least 5 girls he dated reported being beaten and obtained restraining orders against him. In 2021, one of his ex-girlfriends was assaulted, leading to a lawsuit after he choked and severely beat her, which she fortunately survived. During the trial, both the psychiatrist and the prosecutor emphasized that Ashley had a high risk of reoffending. Despite this evidence, Ashley was only sentenced to community service, as it was his first documented crime. Unfortunately, this did not deter Ashley from further offending. Ashley assaulted his girlfriend again. The police took the case a little more seriously, resulting in Ashley being jailed. However, the sentence was too short, lasting only a few months, ending about 2 months before he met Danielle. During the investigation, a woman contacted police after seeing a news report featuring Ashley. She asked to remain anonymous, fearing that he would be released and seek revenge. Her identity was never revealed. The anonymous witness later revealed that she had received a friend request from Ashley on social media. Initially, he seemed charming, leading to a brief relationship. However, over time, Ashley became increasingly controlling and cruel. The relationship lasted 3 months, during which time the woman became genuinely frightened and suspected that Ashley had mental health issues. Police received similar accounts from her friends. During their 3-month relationship, Ashley emotionally devastated the woman, leaving her feeling completely drained. He then began physically abusing her. In July, she attempted to end the abusive relationship. However, this decision almost cost her her life. This incident happened when she was living with her father near Sydney. One summer night, Ashley broke into their house, attacked her, and tried to strangle her. Luckily, she escaped. At the time, her father was sleeping at the other end of the house and did not hear the struggle. Her father later woke up and realized what was happening. He called the police after hearing her screams for help. The police quickly arrived and arrested the attacker at the scene. The girl admitted that if her father did not wake up and she could not escape to another room, Ashley would not stop until she was dead. After Ashley was arrested, the girl quickly described him as cruel and dangerous, claiming he had no control over his anger. Despite these concerns, he was released on bail and given a short sentence. Police discovered more victims, and before the preliminary hearing in the murder case had even begun, 14 cases of violence committed by Ashley had been confirmed in the 2 years following his first conviction and community service. Notably, the mother of one victim contacted police on her daughter's behalf. The girl's mother said her daughter had been engaged to Ashley, but he had been abusive and controlling. When their relationship finally ended, the family was greatly relieved. The police had to deal with a large amount of information and testimony from victims of Ashley's cruelty. But in the end, their efforts were in vain. On April 6, 2024, 16 months after Ashley was arrested, he was found dead in his cell. Police are currently investigating the details surrounding his death. Ashley maintains that he is innocent and has no remorse for his actions, denying all charges against him. With the help of psychiatrists, he appears to have made some progress in dealing with his difficulties and hopes to escape punishment by declaring himself insane. There are concerns that Ashley may have been targeted by fellow inmates, especially just days before he was scheduled to meet Danielle's family. Tragically, Danielle's family will never have the opportunity to express the pain caused by Ashley's actions. Despite this, Danielle's family are determined to seek justice. They have approached the authorities with a plan to change the law. They believe the legal system has failed to protect Danielle from a dangerous offender who has repeatedly harmed women without consequence. They want to ensure that justice is served and that similar incidents are prevented in the future. Danielle's family has received significant support, but it is unclear whether their efforts will be successful. In Danielle's case, the public and the media have both asked dating apps to provide statistics on users' criminal records, including any convictions or offenses. Danielle is a decent person with serious intentions, and she would have clearly avoided Ashley if she had known about his past with other women. There are suggestions that there should be special electronic monitoring for criminals like Ashley as they re-enter society. This not only ensures their safety, but also alerts the public to the potential risks that people like them can pose. Danielle's family are now campaigning for laws that would require mandatory checks on dating apps. They have received significant public support for this cause from the Australian public. According to Ashley's ex-girlfriends, these checks could help identify and prevent incidents like what happened to Danielle. The media has highlighted that Australian law seems to prioritize the safety of criminals over the well-being of those around them. Unfortunately, the justice system is slow, and any changes take time to make. There are now dating websites that allow users to check the criminal records and previous offenses of new acquaintances. However, this raises additional questions, such as how to ensure these databases are kept up to date. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Tasha Morton. Dwayne Barentine was a single father raising his 6-year-old son. Nothing is known about the child's mother. In June 2007, Dwayne and his son lived in the suburbs of Marianna, a small, sunny town in Florida, USA. Although Dwayne worked full-time to provide for his son, he made sure to spend as much time as possible with him on weekends. His parents helped care for the boy, and he also took his son to kindergarten, but the child missed having a mother's care, which concerned Dwayne. He often heard his son pray before bed, wishing for a mother. Dwayne decides to search for a suitable woman who can become his wife and a loving mother to his son. When Dwayne was picking up his son from kindergarten one day, a new teacher handed him a note with her phone number. Curiously, he asked whose number it was, and the woman said it was hers. Dwayne realized she was flirting with him. Attracted by the beautiful blonde, he took the chance and called her. During the conversation, they discovered that they had a lot in common. Tasha was also a single mother, newly moved to the city with her 6-year-old daughter, Lexi. At the time, Tasha was 31 years old and worked as a kindergarten teacher. When Dwayne and Tasha started dating, Tasha's daughter and Dwayne's son were the same age and quickly became friends. Lexi even called Dwayne Dad, which he was touched by. Tasha's daughter was a child from her previous marriage, a subject she did not want to discuss. Her private nature did not affect the couple in the early stages of their relationship. Within weeks, Lexi started calling Dwayne Daddy, and he really loved Lexi. Soon after, they moved in together, in Dwayne's house. He was delighted with his new partner. She was a beautiful and charming woman who showed her love through small, thoughtful gestures. It seemed like they had found each other and had a happy future ahead of them. Dwayne told his old friends and relatives that he loved her very much. To him, Tasha seemed perfect. However, not everyone was happy with their relationship. Dwayne's mother criticized him for rushing into a relationship and moving in together so quickly. She thought they should get to know each other better. But Dwayne ignored his mother's advice. Tasha says she doesn't want to discuss her past because of past hurts. Dwayne chose not to press her for more details to avoid upsetting her. Over time, as more stories about Tasha's past came to light, Dwayne noticed more and more inconsistencies. Some of the stories seemed particularly strange. Tasha claimed that her grandfather was a federal judge who died in a battery explosion and that she was supposed to inherit a large sum of money. However, there was no inheritance, and attempts to verify her stories were unsuccessful, even though such a significant event should have been easy to confirm. As they continued to live together, Dwayne noticed that Tasha often made up stories about her living. This worried him, so he decided to investigate further to learn more about her past. While searching the internet, he discovers that Tasha's first husband was a man named Mitch Kemp, but he was not her only husband. Dwayne uncovered that by age 31, she had been married 5 times, which Dwayne found unusual. And Mitch is Lexi's father. After much persuasion, Tasha finally confides in Dwayne, admitting that her marriage to Mitch was a mistake. She sees him as a friend and has no romantic feelings for him. Despite Dwayne's efforts, he is unable to find Mitch Kemp to gather more information about Tasha. Mitch seems to have disappeared. Tasha mentions that she has not heard from Mitch in years and has not attempted to contact him, which Dwayne finds strange. Eventually, Dwayne contacted one of Tasha's ex-partners, a common-law husband named Jones, who agreed to meet and talk. Jones generally spoke positively about Tasha, confirming that she had been. Dwayne eventually contacted Jones, one of Tasha's ex-husbands. He agreed to meet and talk. Dwayne shared that Tasha was hesitant to share her past with him, so she often made up stories about her life. Jones then revealed something to Dwayne that shocked him. Jones said that Tasha, while drunk, confessed that she was involved in the murder of one of her ex-husbands. According to Jones, Tasha had had a few drinks that night, which made her more talkative. According to Tasha, Mitch raped her daughter. She could not forgive him for this act. At the time, Tasha was married to another man named Greg Morton. She told him about the incident and Greg became extremely angry. Instead of reporting Mitch to the police, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Together, they planned to kill Mitch. Tasha lures Mitch to her new home and Greg waits for Mitch there, shooting him multiple times in the heart. Jones did not believe his wife's story because it seemed like she was making it up. Because she told it while she was drunk, which is why he did not go to the police. However, Dwayne became suspicious because he could not find any contact information for Mitch, Lexi's biological father, whom she had married before Greg. He suspected that Mitch might be dead. This caused Dwayne to reconsider the facts he had heard and began searching for information. However, he could not find any evidence linking Tasha to the murder. So he continued living with Tasha. Despite his concerns, he decided to ignore the situation to ensure his son had a loving mother. She was very loving and caring towards him, which made him doubt Jones' story, so he stopped looking for more information. The couple planned their wedding. After a few months, Dwayne discovered that Tasha was cheating on him. They had an argument, and he kicked her out of the house. Feeling hurt, Dwayne decided to continue his investigation into her past. He went to her MySpace page, where he found a number of unread messages. People were asking if the account belonged to Mitch's ex-wife and wanted to know where she was. According to Mitch's relatives, Mitch had been missing for about 4 years and they had been looking for him the entire time. These messages worried Dwayne, piqued his interest in the story, and motivated him to continue his investigation. Dwayne reviewed all the information he had gathered. He noticed that Lexi's birth certificate bore the last name Kemp. Tasha had married Mitch shortly before she married Greg. One of Tasha's other ex-husbands, Jones, revealed that Tasha and Greg were involved in a conspiracy and that Mitch's murder was a disturbing fact. However, Dwayne could not take any further action as the clues to uncover the truth had run out. Dwayne went to the Marianne Police Department and told the sheriff his story. The police officers listened carefully and were interested in the part involving Mitch Kemp. They started an investigation and asked Dwayne to keep it secret to avoid alarming Tasha. The police believed they were dealing with a murder case and even had suspects. This situation was unprecedented for the town's police, as it was the first time a civilian had independently used social networks to uncover clues to solve an old crime. The police were particularly impressed by Dwayne's accuracy in determining the dates and times of events. He showed a natural talent for investigation. However, the police still have to continue investigating on their own, using every clue to investigate the case. Police initially spoke with Jones, who told Dwayne the same story about Tasha's plot. The conversation was recorded. Police also contacted Mitch Kemp's relatives, who lived thousands of miles away in Boone County, Missouri. From his relatives, police were able to glean important information about the circumstances and timing of Mitch's disappearance. Mitch's family has always suspected Tasha of being involved in his disappearance. At this point, Tasha was 26 years old, and Mitch was almost 11 years her senior. Some people began to doubt her sincerity because she was much younger and very attractive. At first, their relationship seemed perfect, but soon Tasha became controlling and ignored his wishes and those of his family. Mitch, normally gentle and kind, put up with her behavior and became an easy target for manipulation. Despite this, their relationship continued. In 2002, the couple had a daughter and later got married. Unfortunately, their marriage was not long-lasting or happy. They faced financial problems and their relationship was very complicated. This unstable situation could not last. After 8 months, the marriage ended. Tasha left with her daughter. Not wanting to be a single mother, she met Greg Morton before her divorce was finalized. They started dating and she moved in with him along. They were married just 6 months after meeting. Mitch Kemp was very upset because he still loved Tasha and wanted to reconcile with her. However, Tasha refused to return to him, prompting Mitch to pursue joint custody of their daughter by filing a lawsuit. When he informed Tasha, she became very angry, especially after Mitch threatened to seek full custody. In August 2004, Mitch shared this conversation with his brother, also revealing that during their last meeting, Tasha had hit and spat at him. Just 2 weeks later, Mitch vanished without a trace. His brother tried to reach out to Tasha, suspecting she might know Mitch's whereabouts given their serious conflict over divorce and custody. Tasha denied any knowledge of Mitch's location and subsequently ignored all communication from his family. Meanwhile, she continued to pay her bills using funds from Mitch's bank account. Mitch's family was unable to find him, so they contacted the Boone County Sheriff's Department. Unfortunately, the search was unsuccessful and Mitch disappeared without a trace. The investigation reached a dead end and the case was archived without any active involvement. The police found no evidence or confirmation that Tasha and Greg were involved in Mitch's disappearance or murder. About 4 years later, in 2008, the police finally got Dwayne's story. The police believed Mitch was no longer alive. But they had no body, no murder weapon, and no crime scene. Ideally, they need a confession and the police need to talk to Tasha. So the police began looking for Tasha. When the police found her, they invited her to the station for questioning. When she arrived at the police station, Tasha expressed her desire to cooperate with the police. She was unaware that the police already knew about the murder story she had told Jones. She said she was not surprised by Mitch's disappearance, given his bad character, and suggested that someone might have sought revenge against him. When asked about her second husband, she mentioned that she had divorced Greg a long time ago and had little contact with him, knowing nothing about his current situation. Tasha also denied any involvement in Mitch's disappearance. However, the police believed they were on the right track and continued to pressure her to confess. Tasha initially described Greg as a normal, unremarkable person. However, as the police asked more questions, a darker side to Greg's personality emerged. He seemed intimidating, as Tasha began to describe him as aggressive and short-tempered. The police eventually convinced Tasha to confess that Greg had killed Mitch. According to her narrative, one day when she was not home, Mitch came over to discuss custody of their daughter. A heated argument broke out between Mitch and Greg, which escalated into a fight. During the fight, Greg pulled out a gun and shot Mitch several times in the chest. This incident occurred in August 2004. Tasha believes that there may have been hostility between Greg and Mitch, as Greg was extremely jealous and suspected her of having an affair with Mitch. Tasha had anticipated this possibility but hoped it would not come to pass. Fortunately, her daughter was not home at the time of the murder. She assured the police that she was not involved, did not encourage Greg to commit the murder, and did not turn him against Mitch, her ex-husband. She claimed that she only learned about the incident when Greg confessed to her, detailing how he shot Mitch. Tasha also provided information about where to find Mitch's body. Mitch's body was believed to be at the old farm, although she did not know the exact location. The farm was a large area, about 15 hectares, and had been sold after the murder. The old house had been demolished, and a new house had been built elsewhere, making it impossible to recreate the crime scene, which greatly hindered the search for the body. Despite Tasha's claims of innocence, the police began to suspect her, especially because of Jones's account of her presence at the crime scene, and she had lured Mitch to meet the killer. This story warranted a thorough investigation, but could not proceed without the body being found. Tasha cooperated fully with the police. She agreed to travel with them from Florida to Missouri to search for Mitch's body on a farm. When she arrived, she was confused because the area had changed dramatically. Everything had been rebuilt and a new family was living there. As they walked around, Tasha focused on the location of the old house. Even though the buildings were destroyed, she confidently pointed out the location. However, the police found nothing there with their equipment, leading them to suspect that she might be lying. The police believed that Tasha should have known exactly where Mitch's body was. The search for the body on the farm continued. Despite the efforts of the searchers, they were still unable to find anything. After 5 weeks of painstaking and fruitless work, Tasha was questioned again, with the police applying even more pressure. This was to be expected, as they had excavated a large area without finding a single clue. At that moment, Tasha suddenly remembered a large hole being dug on the farm. Greg had buried the body there shortly after he told her about the murder. Tasha was able to point out the location on a map. The police focused their efforts on this spot, and within half an hour of digging, the police found human remains wrapped in a tarp. The body was quickly taken for forensic analysis, which confirmed that the remains belonged to Mitch Kemp, who had been reported missing. Forensic experts determined that he was murdered, finding 6 bullets in his chest that caused instant death. Mitch was shot at point-blank range, leaving him with no chance of survival. 3 weeks after his body was discovered, police arrested Greg Morton in St. Louis and charged him with first-degree murder. Police hoped he would denounce his ex-wife, Tasha, whom they suspected was also involved in the crime. However, Greg remained silent. Police believed that keeping him in custody would persuade him to talk, but this strategy failed. Even after spending months in jail, Greg still did not testify against Tasha. Despite this, police chose to arrest Tasha out of concern she might flee. Although the investigation lacked solid evidence, relying only on a witness statement, she was charged with first-degree murder. Tasha was arrested in the city. She later gave a different account of Mitch's death. She explained that she had indeed taken Mitch to the farm, but claimed that she had no intention of leading him into a trap, as she did not know. Tasha intended to give Mitch pictures of their daughter at kindergarten and wanted to talk to him. However, Greg found out about them together. He approached with a gun and pointed it at Mitch. Before she could react, Greg shot Mitch 6 times in the chest. She believed Greg acted out of jealousy. After the shooting stopped, Greg pinned her against the wall, blaming her for provoking him and causing Mitch's death. She wanted to call the police, but it was too late to help Mitch. Greg forced her to be quiet and then disposed of the body by burying it in a large hole. Surprisingly, after these violent events, Tasha and Greg lived together for about 1.5 years before they divorced. The police were baffled. How could she continue living with the man who killed the father of her child? However, Tasha explained that she feared ending the relationship would put her in danger. 3 weeks after Tasha was arrested, Greg finally spoke up and shared his account of the tragic events with the police. Greg admitted to shooting Mitch but claimed he was manipulated by his ex-wife. He said Tasha had told him about the rape and was seeking revenge. Greg insists that if it weren't for her urging, he wouldn't have hurt Mitch. Despite Greg's claims, Tasha maintained her innocence. In June 2010, nearly 6 years after Mitch's disappearance, Tasha Morton went to trial. Tasha's lawyers argued that she was a victim, trapped in an abusive relationship with violent Greg, who they said killed Mitch and threatened her into silence. Greg's defense argued that Tasha was responsible for the murder. They claimed that she had convinced Greg, her devoted second husband, to kill Mitch, with whom she was fighting for custody of their child. Tasha maintained to the end that she had nothing to do with the crime. However, the prosecution was certain that her manipulations caused the tragic event. The main evidence was the confession of Greg, the killer, who had accepted a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence for second-degree murder. The court ultimately sentenced Greg Morton to 19 years in prison. Tasha's defense claimed that Greg had fabricated the story to get a reduced sentence. They argued that Greg had acted out of jealousy, leading him to shoot the innocent victim, Mitch. During the trial, a neighbor who lived near the couple at the time of the incident testified. He described Greg as domineering, asserting complete control over his wife and demanding that she follow his orders without question. It was clear that Tasha feared Greg and was unable to manipulate him. Then, Tasha's ex-husband, Jones, became a key witness. He recounted a story that Tasha had shared while drunk during their marriage, claiming that she had invited Mitch to the farm with the intention of killing him. However, Tasha denied that this conversation ever happened, claiming that Jones learned the story from Greg, not her. She believes Jones is protecting Greg. Besides listening to the testimony, the jury had to watch over 8 hours of interrogation footage. Tasha's lawyer believed she would be acquitted. The jury recognized that she had cooperated with the investigation from the start, helped in the search, and without her, Mitch's body might never have been found. Her defense argued that if Tasha were involved in her ex-husband's death, she wouldn't have led police to this clue. However, Tasha may have had a motive, as Mitch was fighting for custody of their child. Tasha claimed that Mitch saw Lexi regularly, and they never fought over custody. After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury returned to the courtroom and found Tasha Morton guilty of first-degree murder. The jury explained their decision by noting that Tasha's story had changed several times, while Greg's story remained consistent. They concluded that Tasha had lied and manipulated Greg into killing Mitch. The verdict came as a complete shock to Tasha. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tasha attempted to appeal her sentence, but her efforts were unsuccessful. Mitch's family celebrated the verdict, feeling that justice had finally been served. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Ted Ammon. Hampton, a popular seaside resort on Long Island, is home to many wealthy New Yorkers and is generally a safe, crime-free area. However, in 2001, the first murder in 20 years occurred there, and the brutality of the crime shattered the long-standing tranquility of East Hampton. The affluent area is home to a mansion owned by a wealthy man, just a short walk from the beach. The shocking news spread rapidly through the local media because of the case involving a wealthy victim and the gruesome nature of the crime. Ted Ammon is a wealthy man who achieved success through his intelligence and hard work. Despite his wealth, he remains humble. Ted grew up in a middle-class family in a small town. After graduating from high school, he went to college where he studied economics and also played on the varsity lacrosse team. From an early age, Ted stood out as a strong, attractive, and energetic person. Although he seemed like an ordinary young man from the countryside, his special abilities set him apart. Ted displayed incredible intelligence and excelled in his studies, which helped him land a prestigious job in the early 80s. Ted was engaged in buying out companies using borrowed funds, which gradually allowed him to become one of the best in his field. Ted was recognized for his remarkable financial achievements and accumulated wealth. Although easy to talk to, he never flaunted his money or opportunities. Instead, he quietly focused on doing his job better than anyone else. Ted got divorced in 1983 and needed a new apartment. He scheduled a meeting with a staff estate agent named Generosa, but due to his busy schedule, Ted missed the appointment. People who knew Ted were used to his busy life and understood his absence. However, Generosa was upset and called Ted to express her anger. During their conversation, Ted found Generosa quite attractive, so he asked Generosa out on a date, marking the beginning of their relationship. The romance lasted 3 years, and the couple decided to get married in 1986. Initially, their relationship was passionate, but gradually faded over time. That same year, he became involved with a large company, and a deal was made using borrowed funds in the amount of $26 billion, which allowed him to get a good profit, part of which went to him. By 1992, Ted, having gained valuable experience, decided to start his own business with this initial capital. This marked the beginning of his journey towards financial success. As Ted became more successful, he began to accumulate more wealth. He gradually bought luxury real estate, not only in the United States. His first real estate purchase was a high-end estate in the middle of the country, then a house in Manhattan. He also bought a villa in Surrey. Ted was very generous and actively involved in charity work. During his life, he donated about $15 million to his alma mater, and later established his own charity to support children. Generosa was drawn to the luxurious lifestyle that was completely different from what she had known in her early life. She had little knowledge of her father, only that he was an Italian sailor. Her mother had traveled to Italy, where she had an affair with the sailor, leading to Generosa's birth. When she was just 10, her mother passed away from cancer, and her father never appeared in her life, forcing her to live with foster families. This was a challenging time full of fears and despair that Generosa preferred not to recall. Now Generosa experienced a new world filled with the luxury of wealth. Her husband purchased a lavish mansion in the prestigious East Hampton Village. The house, styled like an English manor, featured 6 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms. The mansion featured a variety of luxurious amenities, including a solarium, gym, library, and a heated pool, along with a guest house, all situated on a 90-acre property that included its own pond. Generosa stayed connected to her roots, and like her husband, valued her past. She dedicated herself to helping others, and chose to adopt 2 11-year-old twins after she and her husband were unable to have biological children. Generosa felt a strong desire to improve the lives of children who faced hardships, similar to what she had experienced. The couple named their children Alexa and Gregory. Initially, everything appeared to be going well, but after a few years, Generosa's behavior began to change. Generosa's first sign was cutting off contact with friends without explanation and acting as if she had been wronged, which she used to justify her actions. Her behavior became increasingly unpredictable, and she often became angry over trivial matters. There was one incident where a wealthy client had 600 tulips planted at their home, but Generosa had them pulled out, saying the colors were not what she expected. Unfortunately, much of her anger was directed at her husband, causing significant strain on their once great relationship. In an attempt to repair their marriage, the couple decided to move to England to start over. However, Ted soon had to return home due to work. Generosa started to suspect that her husband, Ted, was having an affair with one of his co-workers. To address her concerns, she took their children and moved back to the United States, settling in a townhouse in New York. In 1999, to verify her suspicions, Generosa hired a private detective, who confirmed that Ted had a young mistress. This discovery led to the deterioration of their marriage. Additionally, Generosa was worried that Ted was not only cheating, but also trying to conceal some of their shared assets from her. She believed that Ted's wealth was at least $300 million, although this was never verified. Lawyers spent a considerable amount of time determining Ted's actual net worth, which turned out to be $80 million. Generosa planned to claim half of this amount in their divorce. Generosa and her children then moved into a luxury hotel while she began renovating their home, which was expected to cost about $9 million. To finance the purchase of materials and start work, Generosa borrowed $3 million. All the costs for the hotel, renovations, and loan were covered by Ted. Meanwhile, in central Long Island, a man named Daniel Pelosi was told by a friend that a wealthy woman was spending millions of dollars renovating her home. At the time, Daniel was an unlicensed electrician with a wife and 3 children. His family life was quite difficult. Despite his financial struggles, Daniel remained optimistic and hoped to find a good job in Manhattan to support his family. His circumstances changed when Generosa took notice of him and hired him to do some renovations on her house. They soon began a romantic relationship, which gave Daniel access to both Generosa's bedroom and her wealth. The story of a wealthy woman falling for a man like Daniel attracted public attention, especially since Daniel was so keen to flaunt his relationship. He bragged about it almost everywhere. The news reached Ted, and he decided to divorce. The marriage was over, and lawyers were still working to divide the assets and resolve other contentious issues. Daniel and Generosa come from similar backgrounds, both growing up in poverty. This leads to empathy, and their relationship deepens. Generosa tells Daniel that her husband is a traitor, which makes her angry. In search of comfort, she decides to pursue a relationship with Daniel. However, the renovation of her house becomes increasingly complicated and expensive, costing her a large sum of money, including Ted's savings. Meanwhile, Daniel stays with her and enjoys a lavish life. Daniel's new lifestyle began to take a toll on his family. He developed an alcohol problem, which led to several drunk driving incidents. Daniel lived a wealthy lifestyle, generously tipping $100 at restaurants and spending thousands of dollars on nights out with friends. He described his relationship with Generosa as a blessing. By the summer of 2001, Daniel had completely replaced Ted in Generosa's life. Although the divorce was still pending, Daniel lived with her in an East Hampton mansion and drove Ted's luxury cars. On October 20, 2001, Ted's lawyers finalized a deal on how to divide his assets. After settling debts, repair costs, and taxes, Ted was left with $46 million, half of which would go to Generosa after their divorce. By then, however, the money no longer seemed to be enough for her needs. After the divorce, Ted's friends and family noticed that he seemed happier. That Saturday, Ted drove his luxury car to a restaurant for dinner, then took a walk on the beach while talking on the phone with his new girlfriend. He returned to his East Hampton mansion late that evening. The following Monday, Ted was supposed to attend an important meeting at work, but he did not show up, which was out of character for him. He also failed to arrange for someone to pick up his children from school, raising concerns among those who knew him. His secretary tried to reach him multiple times but received no response. Worried, a business partner hired a helicopter to fly to Ted's mansion. When they arrived, they found Ted's 3 dogs barking loudly in the backyard, but no one answered their calls. The garage door was open, and the house alarm was off. They entered the house and noticed the door was unlocked. The partner and the secretary searched the first floor but could not find Ted. They called out his name, but there was still no answer. As their concern grew, they decided to contact the police. Eventually, Ted was discovered in the bedroom, lying lifeless in a pool of blood. Nearby, there was a large amount of cash, suggesting that robbery was not the motive for the crime. During the autopsy, forensic experts found that Ted had suffered at least 8 blows to the head from a blunt object, likely a bat, which caused severe injuries and bleeding that were fatal. The evidence pointed to a brutal murder. When Ted got home that Saturday night, it was clear that he had been attacked. The attacker wanted to make sure that Ted had no chance of survival. Ted's first wife then contacted the police. Although their marriage had ended some 20 years ago, they had remained friends and were in regular contact. She contacted the police to share some disturbing information. Just 2 days before his death, Ted had met with her. During that meeting, they discussed the divorce proceedings Ted was facing. However, Ted believed that their problems went beyond the divorce. He felt tension and hostility in their relationship. Ted even joked that Generosa would not calm down until he was dead. The police, hearing the story, were puzzled that Generosa seemed too weak to confront Ted, who was stronger and larger than her boyfriend Daniel. This raised the possibility that they may have been working together. The police focused on Generosa and Daniel as potential prime suspects, but they found no evidence linking the pair to the crime scene. The murder weapon was missing, along with any fingerprints or other traces. Forensic experts worked diligently for weeks, but their efforts yielded no results. In mid-November 2001, lawyers opened the will. According to the will, Generosa would be disinherited upon Ted's death. However, the will had been newly drafted, and Ted had not yet had time to sign it, so Jenny received half of Ted's estate, while the other half was transferred to a charity. This situation provided a strong motive for the murder, as Generosa and Daniel believed it was better to be an extremely wealthy widow than to receive nothing. The police wanted to discuss the situation with Generosa and Daniel. However, they refused to cooperate. The couple isolated themselves in a villa, avoided all interaction, and hired highly skilled lawyers. The media covered the event extensively. Although their lawyers advised them to stay away from journalists, the couple chose to ignore this advice. Daniel quickly divorced his wife and married Generosa just 1 day later. Instead of being upset about her husband's death, she seemed quite at peace with what was happening. Ted's murder, which was reported in every newspaper and television station, attracted national attention. Daniel and Generosa's lawyers were criticized for their extensive efforts to shield the couple from the investigation and trial. During this time, Daniel and his children moved into another mansion owned by Generosa. Soon, they started spending lavishly thousands of dollars a day. They thoughtlessly squandered the money accumulated through decades of Ted's hard work. Fortunately, this lavish lifestyle lasted less than a month, as Daniel had to return to Long Island to stand trial for drunk driving. Police officers suspected that the Daniel might attempt to escape to another country, so they were cautious. For several days, he was unable to stay silent and seemed to enjoy the media attention, even if it was connected to serious allegations. He was far from discreet. His wife, Generosa, moved in with him at their East Hampton home, where neighbors noted their loud behavior and frequent drinking sessions. Generosa was often seen intoxicated and behaving inappropriately, causing the couple to become a source of shame for the local elite community. The situation deteriorated further. By May 2002, Generosa started experiencing frequent fainting spells, and by June, she was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. While Daniel pleaded guilty to drunk driving and received a 1-year prison sentence. He was released in June 2003, hoping that the Ted case had died down, but the investigation was still ongoing. Throughout this time, it remained the focus of media attention. Although the investigation produced no direct evidence linking Daniel or Generosa to the crimes, circumstantial evidence suggested their involvement. Generosa and Daniel secretly installed video surveillance cameras in the mansion to keep an eye on Ted. The surveillance cameras were supposed to record the moment of the attack, but it was discovered that someone had erased the hard drive. This was a crucial clue, as only the two of them knew about the cameras. However, This information only added to the circumstantial evidence. Meanwhile, Generosa's health was deteriorating as she battled cancer. Realizing that her time was running out, she made a will assigning her assets to her husband's children and a charitable foundation. She also allocated $2 million to her husband to cover his legal costs. In July 2003, Generosa and her children moved to another mansion. Generosa now wanted to spend her last moments with her loved ones. Just a month later, she passed away from her illness, leaving the children without parents for the second time. This led to a custody battle between their nanny and Ted's sister over the twins. For a time, the twins were separated. Gregory went to boarding school while Alexa stayed in East Hampton with the nanny. Eventually, Ted's sister won custody, and they moved to Huntsville, Alabama. Daniel was thrust into the spotlight when he was charged with the murder of Ted Ammon. The DA's office claimed that he had motive for the crime. They presented evidence that they believed was strong enough to convince a jury. When the trial began, Daniel's lawyers prepared extensively. With financial backing from Generosa, he was able to hire top experts. The police spent 9 months interviewing witnesses, all members of Daniel's inner circle. Among these witnesses, helped the police gather incriminating evidence against him. About a year before Ted's death, Daniel made some suspicious comments, stating that he would do anything to get money from Generosa, even if it meant committing murder. Daniel squandered all the money Generosa gave him to support his lavish lifestyle. After the murder, he bragged to some friends that he had killed Ted, excitedly recounting that Ted had begged for his life and even cried, but Daniel had shown no mercy. This story was later repeated by others, and he continued to brag about it for days. The prosecution faced a challenge with Daniel's alibi. On the night of the murder, his sister, who lived 60 kilometers away from the mansion, confirmed that he was with her. Initially, she supported this claim, but after further questioning by police, she provided new information. She stated that Daniel and a friend actually arrived at her place around 10 p.m. He took something from the attic and left around 2 a.m., returning only at 8 a.m. This revelation exposed several inconsistencies in his alibi, suggesting he had enough time to travel to East Hampton and back after killing Ted. Daniel's sister said she hugged him before he left that night and noticed something unusual about his leather jacket. He then stopped answering her questions and suddenly left. It is believed that he stopped by his sister's house to retrieve the murder weapon. Daniel then drove 45 minutes to Ted's house, went inside, and waited for Ted to arrive. The attack was sudden. While Ted was unconscious, Daniel struck him multiple times in the head, fracturing his skull and leaving him with no chance of survival. The next morning, Daniel returned to his sister's house, but she was awake and able to provide details about the time of the incident. This information was crucial to the prosecution, casting doubt on Daniel's alibi. Daniel's father reported that the day after the incident, he had a strange conversation with Daniel. It seemed like he was asking leading questions about how to hide an object so that it would never be discovered. The father, not fully understanding the situation, suggested sending the object to be recycled and offered several other ideas, not knowing that he had inadvertently helped a criminal dispose of a murder weapon. The prosecutor's office had gathered enough evidence and circumstantial information, so the police decided to question Daniel one last time just days before filing charges, hoping to get a confession by offering him a deal. On March 23, 2004, Daniel had still not confessed to the crime. Nearly 2.5 years after the murder, the media and public were waiting for updates, but there was still no major news. Daniel was charged with second-degree murder, which carried a sentence of up to 25 years. On the day of the trial, the prosecution introduced 2 new witnesses who had been in custody with Daniel after the attack. Prior to the hearing, the prosecution used these witnesses to obtain audio recordings of Daniel's testimony. In these recordings, Daniel describes how he violently attacked Ted with a baseball bat, intending to break all the bones in Ted's body. During the trial, Daniel's defense attorney claimed that Ted was promiscuous, saying that he was dating multiple women at the same time. The attorney wanted to imply that this lifestyle could lead to multiple potential suspects, suggesting that anyone could have had a reason to hurt Ted. Daniel unexpectedly decided to testify in his own defense, leading to a tense 5-hour standoff with the prosecutor. The situation attracted the attention of many journalists, adding to the pressure. The defense attorneys attempted to blame Generosa. Daniel admitted that Generosa had offered to kill Ted, but he refused. This defense strategy was intended to cast doubt on the jury by implying that Generosa could have been the real killer. However, it was difficult to determine Generosa's involvement and her true role in the violent crime. It is difficult to determine whether Generosa was involved in this violent crime and what her role may have been. The truth may never be known, as the secret was buried with her. 2 years after Ted's death, the jury spent the entire weekend deliberating. They finally returned a guilty verdict. Daniel Pelosi broke down in tears. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. He still denies any involvement in the murder, maintaining his innocence.